The story begins with a massive explosion that destroys a building. Flames spread across the area, intensifying the chaos as a man appears wielding a flaming sword. As the man strikes, the ground cracks and burns under the force of the blow, releasing a powerful surge of energy. Changing the direction of his swing, he delivers a downward strike, and a magical circle materializes in the background using the meteor impact attack. The sheer force of the strike becomes evident as the shock wave destroys additional buildings. After the attack, the buildings already blaze continued to burn, while others that had been untouched are now set aflame. Gut stands still, holding his sword, bewildered as he realizes his attack was interrupted. He wonders how someone could block such a powerful blow. At that moment, a figure in the background is revealed, deflecting Gut's attack, prompting a question about the strength of High Auntie Kim. Gritting his teeth, veins bulging on his face, Gut sweats as he hears it's now the protagonist turn to strike back. A young man with black hair appears, gripping his sword, staring down Hyeon Kim. He swings his blade, declaring it's now his turn. The narrative shifts to the tale of the strongest hero. The black-haired young man lands a direct hit on Guts, forcing him backward. The protagonist's eyes burn with determination as the story recounts how he was cast out for being weak and how this battle marks the beginning of his vengeance. On a fateful day, countless plants and animals on Earth transformed into monstrous creatures. Beings from other realms invaded Earth, unleashing destruction and plunging the world into utter chaos. Wielding even greater destructive power, an elf emerged, Ed, raising his hand and launching a fire attack toward a city. The city endured relentless bombardment from elves and attacks from the creatures as homes and buildings were obliterated and the Earth descended further into devastation. The Earth, engulfed in total chaos, saw flames consuming cities with increasing ferocity, inflicting severe damage on all. A desperate bystander collapsed on the ground, begged for help as a creature closed in, ready to kill him. The creature, now charging at the bystander, bared its sharp teeth and growled with bloodlust. Just as prepared to strike, the beast was hit with a precise attack to its mouth by a nearby hero, and a voice declared that Earth would rise to face the challenges and would not fall silently. The monster, now missing one of its limbs, lay on the ground as someone stood over it holding a sword. In the background, a narration revealed that these individuals were heroes with extraordinary powers and that guilds were beginning to form around them. With a roar of intense fury, an enormous monster appeared. Its cries echoed everywhere, marking it as a boss. The monster's goat, weighing a mass Mivax, charged at one of the heroes, its strength making the ground quake with each step, unleashing a devastating attack. The goat monster strike was somehow blocked by the hero, though he was being overwhelmed, cursing under his breath. The hero, Juno Hang of the Heroes Guild, wondered how the creature could be so powerful, leaving him uneasy. Juno barely held off the axe's strike, his shield cracking in half, while the creature's other hand advanced toward him. Looking back, Juno realized the monster was as strong as he was and understood this battle might never end. Just then, another figure appeared, blocking the attack in the nick of time, barely managing it. Jianu, a support class hero from the Heroes Guild, halted the creature's blow, the sound reverberating among the gathered heroes. Nearly out of strength, Jihan began giving orders to those nearby, urging them to attack quickly as he wouldn't hold on for long. At that moment, a girl appeared from behind, declaring she knew what to do. As she moved into position to launch her own attack, the monster noticed a mage behind it, but couldn't stop her from releasing a powerful lightning strike. The attack created a strong shock wave, raising dust and temporarily obscuring visibility as the monster, now kneeling, trembled from the pain on the ground. The mage smiled defiantly and asked if the goat enjoyed the strike, revealing herself as Si and Lim of the Heroes Guild. Meanwhile, Si and Lim added that she hoped the goat stayed down as she had no mana left for another attack. Meanwhile, the goat rises again, letting out a powerful howl as the mage watches in disbelief, questioning how such a thing could be possible. Stunned by the creature's resilience, she freezes for a moment as the monster charges toward her. Just as the monster is about to strike, Jihan swiftly intervenes, stepping in front of her and deflecting the attack. The mage, looking at him, calls out Jihan's name as he remains focused, bracing for another potential blow to withstand the impact. Still on the ground, the two ponder why the monster stood up after such a powerful attack, their uncertainty growing as the threat looms closer. With a changed expression, Jihan's eyes glow green, radiating an intense energy. A heroine suddenly appears, emanated a yellow aura, wielding twin daggers in both hands. She is a damaged class member of the Heroes Guild. Me, previously still, now charges forward with agility and confidence, ready to confront the danger. Using her rapid slash skill, Mia delivers a series of powerful strikes, leaving deep gashes on the goat dropping to its knees and in greater pain. Then from the mag's attack rises again, growling with rage and bloodlust in its eyes, sensing an imminent counterattack and knowing it won't be enough to bring the goat down. Mia points skyward, signaling where the real strike will come from. Guts appears, his flaming sword in hand, delivering a meteor impact from above. The blow is so powerful it finally fells the goat. The attack's force spreads flames from his sword, consuming nearby areas and defeating the bull goat, which collapses amid the fire. The bull goat, lying motionless, showcases the strength of the Heroes Guild. Heroes and the power of other champions yet to emerge. Standing tall, Guts declares another dungeon cleared, satisfied with being the first to complete the mission and ready for the next challenge. He confirms the boss is down for good, and it is revealed that the final strike was delivered by Hyeon Kim, the Heroes Guild platoon leader, as his allies cheer victoriously. Jihan watches them, saying, "What about me? I've been here since the beginning too." He reminds everyone, asserting that his presence was crucial. The protagonist, his gaze empty, observes the celebration, feeling neglected and isolated amid the RRY. But everything changed that day following the boss's defeat. The city lay in ruins after the battle, with weapons and swords scattered everywhere, a testament to the chaos. A pile of defeated monsters is shown, with red-haired Guts seated atop one, his sword resting across his body. Guts calls out to Jihan, locking eyes with him, and without much explanation expels him from the guild. Jihan listens in shock to Kim's decision, unable to process what he just heard. A sudden downpour begins as Jihan questions the reason behind it all. Still reeling, he walks through the city, clutching his bag and phone as the rain intensifies. Checking his bank account, Jihan sees his reward amounts to just 10 million won. Disappointed, he stares at his earnings, lamenting that he worked like a dog for 7 years only to go unappreciated in the end. Head down and dazed, he recalls the words his former comrades spoke to him. Juno, the platoon's muscle, accused him of being a leech who took advantage of others in the team. Cn Lim mocked him for being too weak, claiming any rookie with proper training could surpass him. Ali, with a cold stare, unhesitatingly said, "You're weak, Jihan." But the harshest words came from his leader, who declared Jihan a dead weight to everyone, especially the guild. Haunted by these painful memories, Jihan looked skyward, anger blazing in his eyes. Standing in the rain, his fists clenched and his expression sorrowful, Jihan wonders why he stayed with Kiros from the very beginning. What was it all for? Jihan, whose story comes to an abrupt end as the rain continues to fall, with thunder rumbling in the distance. A lightning bolt seems to strike near Jihan, and suddenly his eye glows with an intense green light radiating from within. Jihan begins to perceive green grid-like lines around him, as if his vision has been altered by some unknown force. Staring at the green lines, Jian quietly utters the name of his ability, a skill that only activates in rare moments. After being expelled from the guild, the protagonist spent days and weeks wandering aimlessly, searching for a new guild where he could rebuild himself. Seated at his desk, Jihan stares at his computer for hours, scouring for a new opportunity. Eventually he focuses intently on the screen and announces that he's found a guild called Epic. Startled by what he sees, Jihan watches several windows pop up in front of him, calculating the guild's growth probabilities. If he were to join, the odds are 99%, reminding the protagonist of his former companions' faces. Once again resolutely, he declares that with his abilities and the odds in his favor, he will do whatever it takes to succeed and achieve his revenge, no matter what. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a cozy room lined with bookshelves and a steaming kettle on a table. A sofa and a table cluttered with instant noodle cups appear, accompanied by a weary sigh. At that moment, someone is shown sitting in front of a computer, visibly irritated, complaining about a power outage interrupting her noodle preparation. As the room remains dark, the woman is startled when someone abruptly opens her door. Still reeling from the sudden intrusion, her only reaction is to ask who it is. Jihan, drenched and breathless from the rain, mutters only one word: Epic, with water dripping from his face and a pitiful expression. Jian simply says he has come to apply to the Epic Guild and hopes to be accepted. Caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, the woman murmurs something about him joining the guild. Still confused, a loud sound interrupts the moment as Jihan collapses, weakened from the rain, or perhaps overcome by the sight of the stunning waifu before him. Someone fetch a pillow for the boy as he's down for the count. The waifu panics, realizing he's unconscious and won't wake up no matter what. Hours later, Jihan regains consciousness, sits up, and wonders what happened as he scans his surroundings. The Woman approaches the protagonist, asks if he's okay and begins to explain what transpired while he was out cold. She elaborates that he had been unconscious for hours and wouldn't wake up, then asks if his name is Jihan. The person before him introduces herself as Suk Kim, the leader of the Epic Guild. Jihan, still reeling from his fall, rubs his head and massages his temples before asking Kim how she knows his name. Kim reveals that while he was unconscious she searched his belongings and found his Kiro's guild ID card. She starts to wonder aloud why someone from such a prestigious guild as Cairo would want to join a small guild like Epic. Nodding slightly, Jihan slowly rises and says he'll explain everything that happened and how he ended up in his current state. The protagonist begins recounting his story to Kim, who sips her coffee, her gaze fixed on him with a gesture of gratitude for his openness. Kim clasps her hands together in front of her, prominent features, now seated with her coffee set aside. She thanks him again and says she's eager to hear more about his journey and what led him there. Placing her hands under her chin, Kim expresses her understanding of his situation but questions his decision to join such a small guild. Jihan, stunned, is momentarily at a loss for words and lowers his head in silence. However, he wonders if they'd believe him if he revealed the truth about his mysterious and unique ability. Perceiving his hesitation, Suk gently remarks that he must have his reasons for holding back and offers her own story and solidarity. To this end, she removes her headphones and reveals she was born of a human and an elf, identifying herself as a half-elf. The protagonist freezes at the sight of her pointed ears, only able to repeat what she just said. She begins recounting the events of the otherworldly invasion of Earth, when the existence of different races became widely known. An elf with ketchup-stained hands is shown briefly as she explains that among the most dangerous invaders were the elves. Holding a gaming controller in her hand, she acknowledges the elven blood that courses through her veins, blood from the same elves who massacred humans. She asks Jihan if what he's learned doesn't make him fear her or the elves responsible for the human slaughter, and whether he still wishes to join Epic. They locked eyes intensely, either willing to look away from the other. The protagonist noticed Kim's trembling hands and remarked that if she truly wanted to intimidate him, she should stop shaking like that. Jihan then stated that he had no issues with elves, pointing out that they were not so different from humans and shared many similarities. Surprised by his words, Kim immediately stopped trembling and stared at him astonished. He smiled and added that only fools would discriminate against any race in the world. After the invasion of Earth, the wife, who with the notable assets, blushed deeply, covering her face with her hands as tears rolled down her cheeks, making it clear she had developed feelings for the protagonist. She thanked Jihan for the conversation and promised to carefully review his application to the guild and contact him soon. After they expressed gratitude to one another, the staff resting on the table began to emit a faint glow. The light grew brighter, shining like a rare unseen diamond, startling both of them. Kim, especially alarmed, questioned aloud what was happening with Fren. As the staff began to shimmer and move on its own, Kim explained to Jihan that this was an elven elemental spirit that had been dormant for 12 years and had just awakened. The protagonists, baffled by her explanation, kept staring at the glowing green orb. When he finally asked why it was so close to him, a sudden flash of light engulfed him like a magical flashbang. Kim panicked, running toward Jihan and yelling at Sil to stop, though she knew it was already too late. The explosion caused by the spirit damage nearby buildings and the shock wave reverberated throughout the area. Sil's light dispersed, illuminating everything around it before ascending to the sky, clearing the clouds and revealing an incredible view. Inside the house, Kim sat on the floor, stunned by the interaction between the spirit and Jihan, unable to believe the outcome. As the dust settled, Jihan began radiating a powerful and intimidating aura. Kim, still in shock, declared that Sil had made a contract with a human, and began questioning why the spirit had chosen Jihan as its master. Our hero had gained a unique and rare ability of the elemental class, granting him the power to communicate with special beings and wield their abilities. In this world, heroes with unique abilities who form contracts with special beings are known as elementalists. These elementalists are rare and revered. Each one of 4 is capable of rivaling entire guilds. The first introduced is Luca Harrison from England, an elementalist of mist. Next is Massi Soa from Samoa, an elementalist of water. Finally, Abu Bakar from Egypt, an elementalist of sand. Each of these elementalists is a hero of unparalleled caliber, distinct from all others, and now a new elemental hero has been born. Back in Kim's house, she remains on the floor following the explosion, while Jihan stands holding the glowing green sphere behind him. The silhouettes of the other elementalists destined to appear in his journey of vengeance loom faintly. Jian's newfound ability is revealed to be mastery of wind. The scene shifts to the facade of Kim's guild as Jihan. Bewildered questions what just transpired. Sitting on the sofa, Kim explains and Jihan asks, so you're telling me I made a contract with an elemental? She confirms it with a nod. Kim elaborates on Sil stating that the spirit wields the power of wind. She also mentions that Sil had a contract with her late mother and wonders why the spirit chose Jihan. After hearing her explanation, Jihan hesitates and says he cannot accept it, asking if there's a way to break the contract. Kim informs him again that it is impossible. Once S selects a master, there is no undoing the bond. She further reveals that the only way to sever the contract is through the death of the chosen master, leaving Jihan in utter shock. Jihan, overwhelmed, asks what he should do now. Kim crosses her legs and replies with a teasing smile, what do you mean by that? Standing up, she congratulates him for joining Epic and casually asks if he'd considered applying to another guild. The protagonist replies that he hasn't considered any other guilds and is only interested in joining Epic. Hearing this, Kim blushes and remarks that he has excellent judgment. The wife, who with that notable assets, smiles and promises to help him master S's powers. Kim is startled by the sight before her as the protagonist eagerly says he just wants to test his new powers as soon as possible. Thrilled, the protagonist channels a green orb in his hand and declares it's time to head to an MA. The term M refers to specific zones filled with monsters. A blue dome is shown in the background as the explanation continues, stating these zones are ranked from 5 to 1. The evolved plants and monsters are categorized from weakest to strongest, with each zone featuring a monster corresponding to its rank. Kim and the protagonist head toward one of these zones to train and explore the potential of his new powers. Holding his sword and gazing upward, the protagonist announces they are heading to the rank 5 area located in Bin. Jihan, confident in his HA, states that this location is perfect for testing his abilities. While Kim looks around nervously, he asks if something is bothering her, startling Kim, who sheepishly admits she's never trained in an M before and is quite nervous. Jihan, taken aback, asks why she didn't mention this earlier, to which Kim confesses that as the guild leader it's embarrassing for her. As the two enter the monster zone, the protagonist declares that he'll take the lead, this time with his sword in hand and Kim clutching her staff. They venture deeper into the area. They navigate through the debris left by battles between heroes and monsters. Jihan asked Kim to scan the area for monsters and she responds asking him to give her a moment. Kim checks the radar and reports that the monster in this area is a cockatrice. She explains it was last spotted nesting in the area and 2 weeks ago news reported a truck overturning, leaving its offspring scattered everywhere. Drawing his sword, Jihan remarks that these monsters are perfect for testing his new abilities, with fallen buildings surrounding them and destruction dominating the landscape. The scene transitions to a narration. This is a war zone, a place where blood spills and flesh tears, where fear takes hold. Realizing they're alone, Jihan states, since it's just the two of us, I'll have to play both tank and damage dealer. Kim senses something off about the area. The pair continue walking until Kim detects movement coming from a nearby parking lot. A caucus is spotted behind a car snacking on its afternoon meal. The monster notices them but doesn't drop its meal, instead spreading its wings wide. Both Kim and Jihan feel an immense pressure emanating from the creature and ready themselves for whatever might come next. Jihan quickly instructs Kim to guard his back while he engages the monster. Heaten, the creature takes a single step, its sheer weight causing the ground to tremble. It charges at them, raising a massive claw to strike, displaying its terrifying strength. Jihan raises his sword just in time to block the attack, grinning as he realizes he's no longer the same as before. Still holding off the attack, Jihan calls out to Kim. Kim, standing behind him, begins casting a powerful spell. With her eyes glowing, Kim releases an attack called Wind Arrow. The projectile hits both Jihan and the cockatrice, hurling them apart and shaking the surrounding area. With its impact, the monster crashes to the ground, the force of the attack cracking the earth beneath it, showcasing Kim's incredible power. Jihan, recovering, praises Kim's impressive attack, to which she replies with a smirk, revealing she graduated first in her academy despite appearances distracted by their banter. Ether notices a flock of additional cockatrices approaching. Kim senses them first and shouts a warning to Jihan about 3 birds attacking him from behind. He turns sharply, his green eye glowing once again as his ability Activates the incoming cockatrices are caught in the glowing green lines of his power and a danger signal flashes above their heads. The protagonist looking at the monsters in front of him speaks the name of his skill called sampling, then he asks to calculate the evasive maneuvers. A window appears calculating the probabilities of evasion, showing him falling to the ground as the monster charges toward the protagonist. The only thing he does is crouch and a window appears showing that the chances of evasion were 82%. Looking at his hand, he immediately starts conjuring the same green sphere as before. The name of his new skill is haste, and with it the birds in the area are all put to rest. He passed through them all without taking a single hit, and the monsters' heads remained as trophies of his story. With his sword raised, he looks back and sees what his new abilities are capable of. Kim is shocked by what she just witnessed, and says that he managed to use Sill's abilities with precision. She continues, saying that it's been less than a day since he got these new skills, wondering how it's even possible while he stands in a badass pose. C asks if he is a genius for pulling all this off. The protagonist sheaths his sword again and calls out to C. Then he picks up some of the bird's feathers and tells SEO that they're going to farm endlessly now. While crouched, he thinks this is a good way to test his new abilities. His skill activates again, making him realize something is still wrong. He abruptly turns and tells Sihu to look behind her as quickly as possible. Another monster appears behind Sihu, much larger than the previous ones they defeated, heightening the tension even more. The creature unleashes a powerful attack towards Sihu, and the sound of the strike echoes through the area. He manages to grab Sihu in time before anything worse can happen to her. With Sihu in his arms and behind the bird, the protagonist asks the waifu of airbags if she's okay, to which she responds affirmatively. Both of them, wielding their respective weapons, wonder why on earth that monster is there. Gun, observing closely, believes that this monster is a mutant. The protagonist's eyes glow green again and his skill activates once more. At that moment a window appears calculating the chances of flight, while a danger sign lights up over the mutant bird's head. With Jihan standing in front of Se, who he asks if she can hold off the monster for 1 minute, and she questions why he runs toward the monster, repeating that it won't be for long. The creature activates some kind of ability in its claws. It charges toward the protagonist with its wings and mouth wide open. The bird raises its claws and he, holding his sword, tells Sihu to attack now. C, who staying behind, begins conjuring her spell to attack the monster. Slow wind, a skill that managed to hold the monster for a few minutes while the protagonist charges at it. The bird still tries to attack him, but fails to land a hit coming from above. The protagonist holds his sword to attack, dragging the creature along. The spell begins to crack in some way as the protagonist charges. The spell finally breaks, allowing the bird to react in time to the attack. The two face off as the bird opens its mouth. The protagonist advances with his sword ready to strike. At the moment of the attack, the protagonist remembers Guts calling out to him, and what he said about being dead. Wait, only the sound of the monster's mouth snapping shut is heard. The lines that were green now turn red. At that moment the protagonist uses his skill Wind Cutter, slicing the unfortunate bird into several pieces. After using the attack, the protagonist begins to fall slowly toward the ground. Even the scenery changes and someone's legs are shown. Now their face is revealed along with the person saying, "What do we have here now?" The muscular man in a Hawaiian shirt is surprised by what he's seeing, and says he didn't know there was another elementalist. His name is Do Yun from Korea and he possesses earth elemental powers. A new scene is revealed showing a destroyed city with partially demolished buildings. The focus shifts to a devastated area filled with rubble as a gust of wind sweeps through, creating a gloomy and desolate atmosphere. A structure begins to collapse, sending debris falling and spreading dust, while the scene becomes even more chaotic. A giant monster with glowing red eyes and shark teeth emerges from the ground with chunks of rock flying around it. Other red monsters appear, destroying more houses and buildings nearby. However, these are equipped with armor. A character appears shouting for the worms to come at him while unleashing a blue explosion of energy. The Simian character from before now activates his provoke ability and strikes one of the worms, which had its claws dug into the ground. The worm is hit directly by the attack and an explosion is heard by everyone nearby. However, despite the direct hit, the man seems to be struggling with the worm he's attacking. Looking back, he asks C to strike quickly as he can't hold off the worm for much longer. Sim gets into an attack stance, watching the muscular man hold the worm, and says she knows what to do now. With that, Sim, staring at the worm, begins casting her ability called Chain of Thunder. All the worms begin writhing due to the electric current that hits them all at once. Tsun, who is watching the worms ready, now sees them exploding into small pieces. After the attack ends, the surroundings remain charged with a faint electrical discharge. Grasping her staff again, she boasts that she can't believe everyone was afraid of such weak creatures. The muscular man warns her to watch her aim because she nearly hit him, to which she retorts that he should lose weight and stop complaining. The muscular man says whatever and tells her to get ready to leave the area quickly, when suddenly Semlin is captured by one of the worms that survived her attack. She questions if she missed one and asks Jihan to cover her from the worm's incoming attack. With a frightened look, she remembers that Jihan is no longer in the guild and that no one is there to help her at that moment. Sun, who was scared, notices someone tearing through the skies and landing a powerful attack on the remaining worm. With Semlin shocked by the attack, we see that the one who delivered it was Guts, with his red hair striking a badass pose while leaning on his sword. Sun calls out his name and feels relieved to have been saved. The battlefield is shown littered with the bodies of the worms killed by the heroes of the Kiros Guild. Semlim and the muscular man are leaning against the low wall to rest, with her complaining that she can't hold on much longer. The muscular man says the monsters were different from normal and that one of them seemed like a very strong mutant, and disagrees, saying none of those monsters were actually mutants or anything like that, and that they were all weak. Guts appears in front of the two and says there was nothing unusual about them, they were just giant worms. Clenching his fists in anger, Guts demands an explanation. Punching the wall, Guts asks why they couldn't defeat them. The muscular man in Sem left in shock and tried to explain that it wasn't exactly like that. While someone appears in the background, the two, still stunned by Guts, look to the side and are even more shocked. M, covered in ketchup, approaches them holding her dagger and glaring angrily with a murderous look and ketchup stains. She declares that District 2 has been cleared. Guts, turning around, calls her name and reminds her that he told her not to overdo it. With veins bulging on his forehead, Guts sternly reminds her that there's no one left to protect her anymore. She stares back at him and replies that she knows and doesn't need to be reminded. The muscular man says the protagonist's name and wonders what happened to him, as they haven't seen him since the last time. For some reason, Guts becomes angry, throws his hands up and tells them not to be lazy. As he storms off angrily, he reminds everyone that Jihan was nothing but dead weight and says they don't need someone like him in the squad. The scene shifts and the protagonist appears radiating immense energy while cultivating his power among the ruins. In the background, Kim is shown trembling with fear as she observes the aura and energy emanating from the protagonist. In her thoughts, she notes that the protagonist managed to defeat that mutant monster alone and wonders what kind of monster he is. He looks confident in his new abilities and gazes at the horizon with one of his eyes glowing green. As always, someone seems to be walking toward where the protagonist and the waifu are. This person questions whether the two of them really managed to kill a mutant on their own. The person gives a sinister smile while holding their backpack and says this must be their lucky day. The waifu with the big airbags runs toward the protagonist, seeing the sliced up flesh, and asks if he's okay. Before he can say anything, Jihan collapses to the ground and the Wei rushes faster to try to help him avoid getting hurt by the fall. She sets her staff aside, cradles Jihan in her arms and pleads with him to say something and not leave her alone there. See her hears Jihan calling her name, looking deeply concerned with a smile on his face and a dead fish gaze. He says they still need to get on with their endless farming. See who, disgusted by Jihan's words, becomes angry with him. She drops him onto the ground, saying she thought he was injured or worse. While both of them remain on the ground, Sia asks if all that meat isn't too much for the two of them to collect, and the protagonist agrees that she has a point. The guy shown earlier now appears behind them and says he can help with that. He takes off his ski goggles and greets the waifu and the protagonist with his eyes closed. He introduces himself. His name is S-Gen, also known as Sashimi, and he's the one who runs the monster cleanup service. The waifu asks, puzzled, as she wasn't aware such a thing existed. The protagonist explains to her that these people are professionals who specialize in handling these tasks. However, the protagonist, not being naive, asks Sashimi what he's doing in an MA. Sashimi explains that because his company is new, he has to work harder than others to make a profit. Sashimi then asks the protagonist if he can take care of all the cockatrice cleanup. See who is happy that someone showed up at the exact moment they needed help with this, but the protagonist is suspicious of something and says nothing. Sashimi, leaning against his bag, waits for their response, but the protagonist thinks there's something shady about him. Sashimi puts on his gloves and says he'll examine the monster carcasses first. Touching the carcasses, he remarks that they're all of good quality and that the cuts are clean and the right size. Sashimi says that with the quality of the carcasses, They could fetch an excellent price for all of it. C, who is overjoyed by what she's just heard, saying they'll finally be able to move to a bigger place. Sashimi, with a malicious grin, says he'll let them keep the rest, but Sashimi places his hand on a glowing purple stone left behind by the mutant. Holding the stone in his hand, Sashimi gives a sinister look, thinking that he's keeping the real prize for himself. It is now explained what the glowing purple stone is. It's a mana crystal that can only be found in mutants, and it's worth a fortune. A bunch of rock starts forming around Sashimi, and he wonders what the hell is going on. The waifu and the protagonist assume combat stances, wondering what's happening while Sashimi is restrained by the rock. Sashimi cries for help, offering to give the mana crystal back to them. Panicking Sashimi hears someone say that this is why they can't stand swindlers like him, and asks if he knows that stealing is wrong. Sue and Jihan look on in shock at the newcomer, hearing their sweet words directed at Sashimi. The muscular man in a Hawaiian shirt appears again, walking towards Sashimi, running his hand through his hair, his veins bulging. He says that the mana crystal belongs to him. Could takes a few steps forward and asks if it's him. DOA from the Dice Guild and the #1 hero in the world. She then asks what he's doing in a place like this. The protagonist holds the mana crystal in his hands and says it belongs to Epic, not Doha, and asks if the rank 1 hero is really going to steal it from them. Doha replies that the association sent him to this location to defeat the mutant and retrieve the crystal. The two glare at each other as the protagonist's eyes begin glowing green again, and he asks why they should care about any of that. At the same time, the protagonist's ability is activated, and with it windows reappear and begin calculating his chances of winning against Doha. Doha, with his hands behind his back, says the protagonist didn't understand what he meant. The protagonist, who was staring at him just moments ago, realizes the man has disappeared from in front of him in the blink of an eye. Doha appears behind the protagonist and says that wasn't a question, it was an order. The protagonist takes a slap to the face while wondering how Doha moved so quickly with little time to react. Jihan finds himself cornered and accepts that his face is about to be smashed into the ground by Doa. The muscular man in flip-flops presses Jihan's head harder into the ground, reiterating that it wasn't a question. The protagonist looks at him with a face that says he's ready to fight back, and Doha calls the protagonist his new elementalist. Doha drives the protagonist's head into the ground. Sashimi, horrified by what he's witnessing, starts thinking that out of all the heroes who could have come, this one is the worst. A narration continues explaining who this person is. He is Doha, owner of the Dice Guild, and one of the top 5 heroes in the country. Doha is an earth elementalist and the only one with such power. He is the hero with divine powers. Kim ready her staff and tells Jihan to get out of the way. Doha tells Kim that it would be smarter for her to stay out of this fight. He continues saying that one wrong move and Jihan will go from king of the hill to crushed. Kim realizes there's not much she can do in this situation and just pouts, knowing he's not bluffing. Jihan and rage slams his hands against the ground. He asks Doha if he really thinks he can kill him. The protagonist, furious, declares that Doha will be the one to die here. Jihan uses his wind bomb ability and pushes Doha away. Doha defends himself from the attack but is still sent flying. Doha asks what the hell just happened while being dragged backward. He continues thinking he was sure he had crushed the protagonist into the ground. Doha reflects that the protagonist always has a trick up his sleeve while Jihan begins to stand up. Doha explains how the protagonist managed to survive after being slammed into the ground. Jihan summoned his elemental and made it absorb the impact. Additionally, he hid the elemental for a potential counterattack. The protagonist battered despite managing to defend himself here. Doha call him an amusing guy. The protagonist's ability activates again and a window appears calculating the probability of continuing to manipulate the elemental. The death probability is 95%. Looking at Doha, the protagonist thinks that he poured all his mana into that attack, and yet Doha doesn't seem to have taken any damage. The protagonist continues thinking that rank 1 heroes are on an entirely different level from everyone else. Doa gets up after taking the attack and the protagonist keeps thinking he can't face him now. The muscular man in flip-flops stomps the ground and calls for his new rookie. Doha continues saying they've each landed 1 hit and asks how they'll start round 2 and who will attack first. Jihan throws the mana crystal to Doha. Jihan tells him he's won the fight and can keep the Mana Crystal Doha, furious at Jian's attitude, asks if he really thinks he can just give up now. The protagonist responds asking if the Mana Crystal wasn't what Doha wanted and says he has no intention of fighting him. The protagonist mentions Article 38 Section 9 of the Hero Law stating that Doha is obligated to accept his surrender. Doha gets angry and says things were just getting good then. He looks behind him because of a loud noise. He remarks again that someone arrived at just the right time as two helicopters come into view holding the crystal. Doha says the newcomers are extras from his guild. Kim, with balloons swaying all around, says those helicopters are from the Hero Association. A woman in the helicopter calls out to Mr. Yun, telling him he can't keep wandering off alone. The muscular man in flip-flops showing the Mana Crystal says he came to take care of some things and that she's already being annoying. Doha, looking at him, says that next time there won't be anyone to save him and asks for his name. The protagonist responds that his name is Jihan Yu and that he's a member of the Epic Guild. Doha just repeats the guild's name sarcastically. Then Doha says they should surpass rank 4 and advance in the exam. While looking at the protagonist, Don mentions that he might recommend him. Jihan, confused, asks why. Doha says it's because he wants to, and that's it. The helicopters that were there start to leave the area. Inside the helicopter, Bha asks his assistant if she heard him and says to recommend the waifu with airbags, and the protagonist, the assistant, responds that the exam is in 2 days and that she can't recommend anyone now. She continues, pointing out that their guild hasn't even gone through the proper formation process. Looking more closely, she notices a wound on Doha's arm and wonders how he got injured. Doha smiles and says this is going to be a lot of fun. With that, the two return to the Epic headquarters. Sashimi kneels and apologizes for his actions. Once again, the two tell him to forget about the apologies and prepare to give him a beating. Sashimi begs for time and asks them to listen to him. Sashimi then mentions that he overheard their earlier conversation about taking the rank 4 exam. He points out that the exam is in 2 days and asks if they don't think it's time to buy new gear, pointing at their equipment. Sashimi says that if they show up with that junk, they're basically asking to fail. Sashimi continues saying he knows a place to upgrade their gear and that if he and Kim aren't satisfied they can beat him to a pulp. Kim and Jihan look at each other for a moment, considering the idea, and then they tell Sashimi to lead the way. The scene changes to show a weapon shop. Sashimi opens the door while the other two stay behind him, looking around nervously. He says there's no one there. Kim Manoy asks the cleanup guy if he tricked them again, and Sashimi denies it. Someone appears behind the three asking who they are. The person says the shop isn't open today. Chuckling, they ask what they want. Someone in the background remarks that the person is a dwarf blacksmith. An explanation follows stating that dwarves are a species known for their excellent blacksmithing skills. It's said that dwarves craft some S-rank swords, making them highly sought after by all heroes. Kim, staring at the dwarf, says she's never seen one in her life, and the protagonist agrees. Kim turns around and thanks Sashimi, saying she never thought he'd take them to dwarf blacksmith. Sashimi used the disappearing act and Kim starts looking for him. The blacksmith insists he's not a dwarf and calls the idea ridiculous. He claims to be human and says he's lived his entire life in Korea. The two are shocked to learn he's Korean. Kim accuses him of lying, saying anyone who looks at him would know he's a dwarf, and Jihan asks him to show his ID. The human dwarf asks if they're an odd couple. He shows his ID, proving he's not a dwarf. Looking closely at his ID, the two realize he's telling the truth. Jihan asks if he's really only 27 years old and why the ID photo doesn't look like him. They think the dwarf forged an ID, and Jihan asks her to call the cops. The waifu gets angry, realizing they've been tricked by Sashimi again, and tells her to call the police already. The human remnant is looking at something and notices something interesting. He asks if he can look at the protagonist's sword for a moment, and Jihan asks why his sword. The dwarf, holding the protagonist's sword, says it's been a long time since he's seen a blade with such scratches. The human remnant asks if the protagonist is a wind elementalist. Jihan asks how he knows that. The human dwarf says any first-class blacksmith can immediately identify a hero's class, and the remnant of humanity continues to say that unfortunately that sword wasn't strong enough to handle the power of an elemental. The dwarf asks for a moment and says he will craft the perfect weapon for an elemental. The dwarf says he found a sword that can withstand any type of elemental power. The sword is now in the protagonist's hand, and the dwarf reveals the sword's name, Hul Nam. Kim comments that the name is terrible for a sword. After their meeting with the dwarf, the day of the exam arrives. In the blink of an eye, someone is seen opening the door handle. The waifu with airbags and the protagonist arrive at the exam location, where many others Our already present Kim tells the protagonist that there are a lot of people here. In his thoughts, the protagonist notes that it's been a long time since he took a rank for exam, especially after leaving the Heroes Guild. Someone behind the protagonist calls him a loser as the protagonist walks by. Some bystanders talk about his expulsion from the Heroes Guild and can't believe he's trying again. Another person says if they were in his shoes, they would have quit being a hero by now. Kim whispers in the protagonist's ear, asking if they're talking about him, and he simply tells her to ignore it all. Jihan remembers Doha and feels relieved, thinking that no one seems to know what happened in Bin. He resolves to do his best. Someone commands everyone to shut up. They say everyone there is making way too much noise for people about to take a pathetic rank for exam. They add that it's time for a reality check. Then, looking at someone, they state that everyone present is mediocre, and none of them are special. Someone approaches the protagonist very closely. This person staring at the protagonist says they are not up to standard. That person is Uni Bang, also known as Cyan Bang. The protagonist's eyes begin to glow again as he curses Doha in his thoughts. Sukun Tang asks if the protagonist agrees, and a window appears calculating his chances of passing the exam. Jihan thinks Doha only recommended him to ensure he would fail. Doha is opening a cookie when someone calls out to him. His assistant appears and says she sent the recommendations he requested, to which he responds that it was fast. However, the assistant says she came across something strange. She asks Doha why he chose Cyan Bang as an evaluator. The scene shifts, and now inside a rank for examinal room a noise is heard. Two people appear, one of them holding a sword. Sukun Tang stands in the middle waiting for the attack from three extras. He stares intently at each one of them. Sukun Tang then states that everyone there rushed at their opponent without even knowing their weaknesses or having a strategy. He declares it's showtime and sends all three attackers flying away. On top of that, he crushes their spirits by saying they're nothing but amateurs. The three extras fall, leaving only Cyan Bang standing. A window appears announcing that Group 12 has been disqualified, i.e. three people behind a one-way mirror are shown, with one of them exclaiming damn. Two people are shown from behind one of them, questioning if this isn't a bit excessive. The woman says that at this rate no one will pass the user of a defective brain mass says it's no surprise, as rank 5 heroes are nothing more than ordinary citizens. His name is Hansa Kim, a rank 4 evaluator. The other person is Hino, also a rank 4 evaluator, who questions what they'll report to their superiors. A hooded man tells them to focus on the last group. His name is John Yil, another rank 4 evaluator. Someone says they'll finally get to see the epic guild. The user of a defective brain mass says he knows. He adds that this guy is the one Doha recommended for the exam, and everyone else there are members of the Dice Guild. Kim and the protagonist head toward the exam room while someone comments that they're in for a reality check holding their respective weapons. The two finally enter the room. The user of a defective brain mass remarks that the protagonist looks tough but lacks flexibility. He continues stating that Skank Bang is the leader of one of the guild squads. The system appears and welcomes them to the rank 4 exam room, informing them that in the next 5 minutes they will have the chance to fight Cyan Bang. The only requirement to pass is that you successfully defend yourself against the evaluator, or that the evaluator surrenders. The Wu with the airbags questions how two people could possibly land a hit on an evaluator as Seong Banji ms an intense aura. The protagonist wonders how he managed to handle those people alone and how he doesn't even have a scratch. Jihan asks Se her to cover him just like they did in the Ma, and Se her responds all right. With that, he activates his abilities and says this fight will be a bit tougher than the others. As the two prepare, the system appears and announces that the fight is about to begin. Sukun Tang with little effort delivers a kick straight to the protagonist's chest, and he barely manages to block it. He says it wasn't fair since Suan attacked as soon as the fight began. An explosion occurs in the midst of the fight. Kim, worried about Jihan, is about to get a dental plan as a freebie. Sukun Tang's punch seems to have hit something other than Kim. Sukun Tang wonders what happened. A barrier had protected the waifu. Sukun questions how she managed to block him. Then Sukun looks to the side and realizes it wasn't her but the protagonist. The fallen protagonist hears Sukun say that Doha's recommendation wasn't just a bad joke. Without much hesitation, Sukun delivers another kick to C's chest, and Sukun suddenly starts running holding his sword. He charges toward the protagonist as the protagonist stands up. The two begin exchanging changing blows. Suin says the difference in strength between them is vast and that even with a wooden sword he can demonstrate his exceptional power. The protagonist activates his glowing eye ability and says he needs to create some distance between them quickly. He uses the wind bomb and manages to push Suin away. Suin quickly does a backflip. Suin remarks that the protagonist is a magic type with wind abilities, and that it's annoying. Jihan uses his disappearing ability and manages to reappear behind Cyan Bang using his haste skill. Suin senses the attack from behind. Meanwhile, someone begins questioning why they chose Suin as the evaluator and notes that this decision complicates the recommendation process. The assistant says this will only make things harder for Epic. Doha remarks that Suin is the only swordsman he knows capable of cutting through wind. Then Suin is shown with a crass smile. He uses his skill rapid attack heart-cutting whirlwind. Jihan is sent flying, coughing up ketchup all over, with Suin standing tall and the protagonist on the ground. Jihan admits he isn't moving at the speed he wants, still spitting ketchup. The protagonist thinks about how he's recovering from the fight against the mutant and Doha, and how on top of that his sword has started draining even more of his mana. Sukin, looking at the protagonist, says this is the best he can do even with Mr. Yun, recommending him as he declares that he'll disqualify the protagonist. See who appears from behind using her attack. She tells Jihan to get out of the way. Her attack manages to push Suin away from the protagonist. After the attack, she stands in front of the protagonist holding her staff and says she'll handle the rest. She thinks she can't keep hiding behind the protagonist forever and that there must be something she can do. Sukin says he doesn't have time to play with weaklings like her, and See Who responds that she isn't weak, pulling her hair back to reveal her ears. She introduces herself as Suk Kim, an elf. Suin says he already knew she was an elf and shouts, asking if a mere mage can directly attack a swordsman like him. Sukin unleashes a flurry of attacks toward the Wei and says she's truly not worth his time. See Who closes her eyes and declares that elves can follow the path of mana. With this she manages to evade each of Sane's attacks, and now it's Sia's turn as she casts her cutting wind ability. Suin calls her a fool and asks if she really thinks that would work. Then he notices another magic circle behind him. He says her simple plan was to attack from hiding and expresses his disappointment in her. At that moment, two more magic circles appear behind him. He wonders what's going on and how someone at rank 5 can launch so many multiple attacks, and he notices that there are even more magic circles. He wonders if she can use 6 magic circles all at once, and he realizes no, she can actually use 7, while Seo's ability restrains him with all those attacks coming his way. He admits that she managed to trap him. An explosion engulfs the area. Her shields herself from the wind caused by the explosion. Then she says there's no way he can avoid this attack and that it should work to defeat him. Sequin appears and says it wasn't bad at all and that her plan to corner him in a confined space was a good one, but he suddenly appears behind her and despite everything says you're too slow. Says he managed to block that attack with his 7 magic circles. Suin says he's been waiting for the protagonist's move, holding his sword. He remarks that this arrogant attitude will cost Jihan the victory. With that he adds that he was wrong and that it wasn't his sword draining all his mana, in fact it was Jihan himself wasting his mana. Jihan in turn decides to focus a small amount of mana and compress it as much as possible into a single attack, and finally he activates his wind sword ability. The scene changes to a room filled with trophies. Someone knocks on the door and a young man standing by the window is shown. He says they can come in. A blonde man with blue eyes enters, reporting on the status of Guts, the squad leader. The person in front of him simply murmurs. He asks about Gangus adaptation and the blonde clarifies, you mean Gang Yu Kim, right? The man confirms and wants to know about the guy who replaced Jihan after he was expelled. The man is introduced Young Southeast Park, the owner of the Kiros Guild. The blonde says that so far there have been some instabilities, but they are adapting. The boss states that Genu will soon surpass the protagonist. Shocked, the blonde says he has something to report. He continues saying that Jihan advanced in the rank for exam. The boss asks what that trash protagonist did and recalls how he barely got a recommendation for the exam. The blonde explains that apparently it was Doha who recommended him. The boss asks again in disbelief what the blonde just said. The scene shifts back to the fight between Jihan and S. Bang Jihan stands tall looking down at Squin. Meanwhile Squin, beaten and battered, stares back at him. Suin asks how someone like Jihan managed to get a recommendation from Mr. Een. Then Suin concedes, saying it's fine Jihan W. He adds that Mr. Yun forgot to mention the protagonist is just an elementalist. The scene shifts again. The pair remarks that they can finally rest a bit. The Wei, smiling, asks the protagonist how he managed to control the power of an elemental so quickly. Jihan says he has no idea. Still, he thinks to himself that after the battle he really did manage to improve his control over the power. He wonders if this was what Doha intended all along. With that he praises the waifu, saying she did a great job distracting Song Bang, and she modestly responds that it was nothing. Jian then tells Kim that they passed the battle evaluation. However, he reminds her that they still need to pass the interview. While sitting, the two watch people leaving the interview room. Then someone calls for the Epic Guild, announcing that they're next. A woman notes that this squad is well prepared, and a man mentions that there were many interesting moments in their battle. Kim and Jihan enter the room. A polite man says that if no one objects, why not get started. Someone objects, stating that they should fail them. A naysayer criticizes the tank, calling him arrogant and doubting his ability to protect someone in danger. His name is Dongyi, a mere member of the Warriors' Guild. He declares that it's absurd to let this squad pass. Another voice agrees, saying they should be disqualified, and someone else adds that at this rate no one will pass. Jihan wonders why their voices are so loud and thinks they're trying to leave a lasting impression on the two of them. The polite man thanks them for coming and tells them to feel at ease. Kim introduces them as members of the Epic Guild. Realizing his mistake, the polite man quickly adjusts the papers in front of him. The man remarks that they were the only ones to win their battle, calling it impressive. Yu sarcastically says it was nothing but pure luck, and Kim plays along, thanking him. The dark-haired man says that since the two were the only ones who defeated the evaluator, there's no need to intervene. The ugly duckling asks Kim if she can even see with her hair in the way and suggests she tuck behind her ears. Kim agrees and pushes her hair back. The guys are surprised and exclaim for everyone to look at what's right in front of them. The ugly duckling changes the atmosphere of the room and declares that she's an elf. Licking his lips, he says he thought she was a pure-blood elf and apologizes. The dark-haired man calls out the ugly duckling, saying his attitude is horrible and rude. The ugly duckling apologizes again, saying it's a bad habit of his, and asks Mr. Protagonist to stop glaring at him like that. Kim tells Jihan that it's fine. Jihan sighs, thinking that this isn't the main issue right now. The ugly duckling asks if they can proceed with the interview. Before anything else, the protagonist comments that the ugly duckling wanted this exact reaction from the two of them. The interviewer asks if Kim's father truly works at an institution in Kyoto researching monsters, and Kim confirms it. She continues by stating that Epic successfully defeated the mutant cockatrice according to her father's findings. The answer is yes. The interviewer remarks that for a new guild with only 2 members, they've achieved incredible feats. Meanwhile, the ugly duck CL calls out to Kim. He says that in his 10 years as a hero he's never seen a half-out form a guild. He then states he has only one question for her. The question is, if a group of elves invaded Korea, what would she do? Kim is startled by the question. In shock, she responds by asking if the ugly duckling can stop dragging this out already. The ugly duckling, taking aback, asks what. Finally, Jihan stands up and asks if mocking people is part of the Warriors Guild's process. You interject, saying that the real goal from the start wasn't to assess their qualifications but to make rude comments about the guild leader. The other 2 interviewers are shocked at what's unfolding in the room. The ugly duckling retorts that he can ask whatever questions he wants since he's the interviewer. The dark-haired man asks the 2 to stop. At first, the protagonist says that if the ugly duckling continues to insult their guild like this, the 2 of them might as well give up their chances of passing. The others ask them to calm down, saying this isn't the time or place to start a fight. Kim feels disheartened and says they're doomed. The scene shifts to the exterior of Epic's headquarters. The waifu with the big airbags is drinking some juice. The protagonist approaches, apologizing for causing them to fail the exam. Kim tells him it's fine. She thanks him for what he did during the interview. She goes on to say that no one has ever defended her like that in similar situations. The protagonist asks if she's okay with how things went and why she keeps refreshing the page. She explains that she's just curious, and the protagonist apologizes again. Kim says the website is about to release the results. She announces that the squad advancing to rank 4 is. The 2 look at each other, questioning what they're seeing. The interviewer appears and asks why he did what he did. They ask if he's certain about it, and the ugly duckling says yes, apologizing for the earlier commotion. He admits he went too far with the two but says it was because he was curious, tossing an apple in the air. He says the name epic. He wonders how far the two of them will go. In his thoughts he calls the protagonist and Kim arrogant brats. He continues thinking that he wants to see them climb the ranks. The two sitting in front of the PC wonder how they passed. Meanwhile the ugly duckling, still in his thoughts, vows to ruin their lives. Kim and Jihan are left questioning how they passed rank 2 area. Post city, a high-speed bus is shown. A group of people with signs and journalists await the bus. Someone is seen stepping off the bus. Someone says that Hyun, the leader of the Kiro's Guild squad, has arrived and asks Mr. Kim to look toward the journalists. Some women shout their love for Guts, while the security guards try to hold them back, telling them to keep their distance. Guts, with his fake charm cranked to the max, says that such behavior isn't necessary. He thanks the people gathered there today and asks them to watch from behind the line for their own safety. As Guts' squad enters the M.A, other people call him a knight and wish him and his squad good luck. Guts places one of his feet inside the maw. Once inside he complains that the worms outside were making his ears bleed with all the noise. The muscular member of the squad mentions there were more people than the last time, and Guts asks how they know their location. Every time someone behind Guts asks if he noticed the girl standing by the entrance, that person says he almost threw up at the sight of her. He is introduced. His name is Gangu Kim. Gangu then asks what kind of girls Guts likes, and Guts responds attractive ones. Jenu says he'll call some pretty girls and invites Guts to join him at the club. Sim says that Mia was standing right next to them and tells him to stop saying such nonsense. Jenu suggests that Sem Lim should come along too, and she asks if he really thinks she would. He persuades her, saying that several models want to meet her and she falls for it. She says she'll invite her handsome friends too. Jenu thinks to himself how easy it is to manipulate them, and with a little push they're all in his hands. However, when he looks at Mei he realizes it's different with her. He can't figure out what she's thinking. Mei asks what's wrong and he averts his gaze, saying it's nothing. In his thoughts he decides he'll need to keep a closer watch on her. Gut hears a footstep and turns around. 3 people are shown and one of them greets. Hi Kim. The person infant says it's been a while since he last saw Guts in M. And Kim replies it's been a few months since the last time. The man asks about the other member and Guts asks clue. The man clarifies the guy who used to carry your bag, the Everlyn. Guts claims the other guy quit and that the current one is his replacement. Jenu introduces himself as the squad support. Scarface asks if that's true and says it's a shame, prompting Kim to ask why. Scarface explains that about a year ago Jihan saved them. He says the way the protagonist moved was something else and he doesn't understand how Jihan managed it while just carrying a bag. Scarface then says that if Jihan ever shows up looking for a guild they should let him know, as he'd be happy to take him into theirs. The two bid farewell and go their separate ways. Guts, furious, hears someone asked if the protagonist was really that good. Jenu responds that all he heard was that Jihan only got in the way and was dead weight. Jenu adds that Scarface gave Jihan way too much credit. As Jenu keeps talking, Guts demands his sword. A dinosaur-like monster is attacking everyone and Guts quickly asks for his sword. Guts aims his sword with flames. He leaps toward the monster while thinking about the protagonist. The scene shifts again, showing a woman saying she can't believe it while others mention they forgot their belongings. A traffic guard declares that the area is now classified as rank 4 and tells everyone to evacuate immediately. While one person worries about property values dropping, another worries if they'll even have a home to return. To the protagonist and Kim appear, asking if this is the right place. Kim responds that it might be. The protagonist confirms that this is the rank 4 area with saber-toothed tigers. One of those kitties leaps toward the two of them, running toward the tiger. The protagonist shouts for SEUC, who begins casting some abilities. The protagonist draws his sword and keeps running. The tiger is struck directly by his attack. The poor tiger is split in two. Kim says she wasn't sure they were ready for a rank 4 area and thought the monsters would be stronger, to which the protagonist replies that the mutant they encountered earlier was a rare case. Kim asks how they'll get the tiger's body down to the first floor and the protagonist suggests calling a cleaning service. Someone screams for help. Cius says it's a civilian who didn't evacuate and the scratch tells them to hurry up. However, the protagonist finds that voice familiar, as if it belongs to someone he Nose appearing beside them. The protagonist says they are heroes from the Epic Guild and asks if everything is alright. Sashimi shows up pleading for them to save him from the kitten. Kim recognizes him and says it's the cleanup guy. The kittens are now all eternally resting. C, who remarks how lucky it is to find him there and says this must be destiny. She asks if he agrees and Sashimi responds that he just needed to use the bathroom and didn't know they were going to close the area. Jihan says he'll let it slide this time since Sashimi got them good equipment, and Sia comments that Jihan is so kind-hearted with that. The protagonist asks why Sashimi doesn't officially join their guild as the cleanup guy. Sashimi asks why it has to be him. The protagonist explains that despite the unfortunate incident he still trusts Sashimi, and Sashimi assures them they can leave all the bodies to him. Sashimi runs toward the building repeating that they can leave all the bodies to him. Ca asks if he's going to trick them again, and the protagonist reassures her that he won't, adding that they need his work regardless. With that he suggests they leave since everything is settled. Someone suddenly appears yelling for the heroes to stop killing innocent creatures, stop the cruelty against creatures. This person goes on saying that creatures deserve respect and are living beings just like everyone else. They shout even louder for everyone to respect all life. Co asks if these people are part of an activist group and Jihan answers that they belong to the IPC. He explains that they're an organization advocating for the coexistence of monsters and humans. As the two discuss, they note how protests around the Ma areas have been increasing lately. SEO asks if Jihan agrees with this ideology and he firmly responds no way, calling it ridiculous even after seeing heroes being killed by the monsters they defend. He questions if they'd still stand by their argument. A security guard says they can't enter this area and a bystander tells them to hurry up and save their friends, the creatures. The guard says they managed to break through the barrier. The bystanders exclaim here come the heroes, don't let them escape. Siu and Jihan find themselves surrounded by activists. Jihan wonders what these people are doing. A crazed protester yells asking everyone to look at the creatures. She continues questioning how heroes can be so cruel. Another protester apologizes to the creature and says how can heroes call themselves saviors, they look more like murderers. The protagonist doesn't understand the civilian frustration and wonders if the association will help with this issue. Doha appears and demands that they move out of the way. He says if everyone is done with their business with that kid. The protagonist turns around and asks who the hell are you? Doha sarcastically responds me and says he's the guy the protagonist hates the most. Doha then uses his skill to create a giant wall of earth. He smirks at the protagonist and asks so what now? Doha, after creating the massive wall, stands silently observing everyone present. Someone calls him Earth Dragon, others call him a clown. In the West he's known as the Earthquake Quake Man. Doha releases a small amount of his power and declares that he prefers to be called Bad Boy. One of the bystanders, terrified, exclaims the bad boy Do Yun, while another asks what's the rank 1 hero doing here? Jihan mutters, why this guy again? He loves showing up out of nowhere. He also wonders if Doha doesn't have anything better to do. Doha then tells everyone to leave quickly and orders them to go to hell. Doha calls out for something and an explosion occurs. This time a dragon appears beside Doha. Jihan, armed, wonders what it is and says is that really an elemental? The dragon is introduced as Mumu, a Terra elemental. Doha commands the dragon to restrain the people present earth and whips lash out toward the bystanders. All of the protesters are ensnared by the whips. One by one they are lifted into the air. Jihan then urges Sehu to leave quickly, but someone says a certified hero can't just run away like that. Sehu complains that they can't leave. Jihan reflects on how absurd Doha's level is since he managed to capture all the protesters without injuring anyone. Doha in turn apologizes for making the two wait. He continues by saying he heard from some people that Jihan and Ca passed the rank for exam. At the same time Jihan reflects on how he faced that monster after his thoughts. Jihan thanks Doha and says he placed a merciful evaluator. Doa laughing says that Bang is intense, but he's actually a good guy. The protagonist questions the intense part, pointing out that Bang almost killed both of them. Doha however explains that he knew enduring that would make them stronger. Because of this Doha wonders between the two of them who is stronger. Shortly after Jihan asks if Doha came there to fight him, another voice interrupts asking if he is Doha. This time bystanders Question what Doha is doing in a rank 4 area, and with that squad CA mentions that those people are members of other guilds. Doha replies that unfortunately they've attracted too much attention and should leave the area. The scene shifts to a construction site. Several workers are shown. A worker greets Doha and asks if he shouldn't be working, to which Doha replies that he was taking care of some things. In his thoughts, Jihan notes that this is where the Dice Guild operates and that there are many people working there. In summary, Doha explains they are expanding the training area and asks for patience with the noise, to which Jihan responds it's no problem. Finally, the guild building is shown. The three enter the building. Inside, Jihan remarks that the place feels as empty and calm as a coffee shop. He adds that he hasn't heard a sound since leaving the construction site outside. SCU, however, is surprised they managed to cover a building like that with such a high level of mana, and says it's expected of a major guild. Jihan asks if it's really that strong, and she confirms, explaining that maintaining a barrier like that likely costs around 20 billion won. Jihan then asks if a guild can really earn that much. A woman appears, thanking them for noticing. The woman asks if C, who is interested in mana barriers, and compliments her for estimating the cost so accurately. The woman introduces herself as the vice leader of the Dice Guild, John Park. After her introduction, the protagonist asks if she's really the guild's vice leader. See her then coming meant that she thought Jang was just an assistant or something. Doha asks if Jang remembers the two and requests her to book a meeting room so they can talk. J Park agrees to schedule the room, but also asks where the hell Doha has been, as he's missed all his commitments. Doha asks who she thinks she is to pinch the guild master, to which she responds that if he wants respect he should stop acting like a child. Jihan remarks that the two of them are making more noise than the construction outside. After the argument between Doha and his assistant, the protagonist and see her follow him to the meeting room. Doha gets straight to the point and asks why they think he brought them there. Jihan guesses it's because of his elemental. Doha confirms he's correct. A light emanates from something. A fox-like dog appears, saying meow. Doha introduces his elemental partner Mumu. He then asks if they remember his partner from when he was handling the activists. Jihan questions whether this little dog really turned into a giant dragon. Back then, Mumu complains that it's busy helping with the construction, but Doha assures the meeting won't take long. Mumu then asks why there are guests present. Jihan greets it. C, who on the other hand is charmed by the little dog, while Jihan wonders what exactly it's doing. Doha asks Jihan to summon his elemental as well, and the protagonist agrees. Jihan summons a glowing green sphere. Once summoned, the elemental moves toward the little dog. Doha says he knew Jihan's elemental was wind-based and asked for its name. Jihan introduces it as Sil. Doha then explains that he brought them there to discuss Sil, and he continues saying that the only elemental discovered in Korea is Mumu, and it has been this way during his 17 years as an elementalist. Doha adds that he reviewed the protagonist's records and found nothing about him being an elementalist. Therefore, Doha says that if he were to pinpoint when Jihan became one, it would be the exact moment he joined Epic. However, Doha states that this doesn't make sense for an elementalist and demands Jihan explain what exactly happened for him to secure a contract with the wind elemental. Jihan is about to explain, but SCU steps forward and asks to tell the story herself. She reveals that S previously belonged to someone else, and Doha asks who it was. C, who explains that it was her mother Wrath, the last person to have a contract with Sil. Doha acknowledges her explanation. He then admits he didn't expect the protagonist to have a contract with Nahas Elemental and says he's at a loss for words. In his thoughts, Doha reflects that he believed elementals disappeared after their owners died, but it seems he was wrong. With his hand on his chin, Doha concludes that although he still has doubts, it doesn't matter anymore. Thus Doha declares that he will explain the real reason he brought them there. Sia says she thought he wanted to know more about Sil. Doha confirms that he does, but there are two important matters to discuss, and the protagonist asks why too. Doha promises to be direct about what he wants to say. The first is that the leaders of the Dice Guild want to buy Epic. SCU shocked asks why. After explaining, Doha offers total control of Epic in exchange for 20 billion won. C, who furious stands up and asks if he's serious, and Doha assures her he is, even adding that he can increase the offer if needed. Doha then says they have a choice: remain a 2-member guild or let him help expand and recruit more people as part of the deal. Doha promises to personally teach the protagonist how to control the elemental and assures he won't interfere with their squad's actions. Doha asks what Jihan thinks, saying this would be ideal for him. Su, overwhelmed, admits it's a generous offer but says she didn't expect it. Doha tells them to take some time to consider before Doha can request a quick decision. Jihan responds that he won't accept. Doha, stunned by his response, asks what. Jihan firmly declares that Epic is not for sale now or ever, leaving Su speechless. A bag is slammed to the ground. Sashimi appears in the area where the activists are restrained and asks what the hell happened there. He announces that he finished his work but doesn't see Jihan anywhere. Excited, Sashimi says he was eager to share and show the protagonist what he managed to achieve. After shifting to Sashimi's perspective, the story returns to the negotiation between Jihan and Doha. Jihan tells Doha that he can double the offer as much as he wants, and it still wouldn't be enough because, like Dice, Epic will also become a large guild in the future. Hearing these words, Doha's expression immediately darkens. Then Su, who had been silent until now, asks Jihan who gave him the right to decide what to do, while Sia cries and strangles the protagonist. Doha bursts into laughter and he continues laughing even harder after his hysterical outburst. Doha says that such ambition is far too great for a two-person guild, and that he didn't expect Jihan to be so arrogant. Jihan, turning to leave the room, says he has faith in their guild. Doha, adjusting his glasses, questions faith and remarks that Jihan talks as if the deal is already done. He adds that the protagonist is truly entertaining. With that, Doha withdraws his offer. C, who attempts to remind him that she's the guild leader, but unfortunately she is interrupted. Doha calls for his assistant and says he's returning something that belongs to them. Doha asks if they remember that stone and reveals it to be the mana crystal from the mutant they encountered earlier. The protagonist asks why Doha is returning the crystal. Doha explains that the association has did its research and that he had planned to return the crystal after acquiring the guild. He continues saying he will return it as a good gesture between two strong elementalists. Jihan thanks him, and as he begins to say it's enough, he is interrupted mid-sentence. Sil, who was with the little dog earlier, flies toward the mana crystal and collides with it. A quick flash fills the area. Standing behind the protagonist, Doha explains that mana crystals are used to evolve elementals. He advises Jihan to collect even more if he wants to grow stronger. Furthermore, he explains that the more Jihan collects, the closer Sil gets to being able to materialize. The protagonist asks if Sil could truly gain a physical form. The scene shifts to the IC's Korean branch. A telemarketing operator thanks a caller for contacting the Yupk and asks how she can assist. The operator becomes startled and asks if the caller is really saying that the pet cat turned into a creature. She reassures the caller not to worry as they will help capture the transformed cat. In the background, someone asks how long it will take for a promotional poster to be ready, and another person replies it might take 3 hours. Two women are talking, with one asking about the next volunteer project. The other replies it might be on the 21st of this month. The woman in blue comments that last time an elderly lady hugged her and it made her feel uncomfortable. The woman in gray says it's nice sometimes. As they chat, some news is displayed and the woman in blue expresses her wish for more people to see the good things they do. She continues saying she's certain that over time things will change significantly. Finally, she adds that each person who recognizes their effort gives a new meaning to her life. A roar is heard, startling both women more. Sounds of claws and roars follow, and the woman in blue says darling as a saber-toothed tiger appears. They remark it's feeding time and the woman in gray says she remembered just in time. The woman in blue asks if she should go buy food, but the woman in gray says just one serving should suffice and nothing too heavy. The woman in blue heads to a cabinet to check if there's anything inside. After opening the cabinet SL cage, a tied-up person is revealed, and the woman in blue greets them. The woman in blue comments that she can't believe the old lady is still alive and notes how resilient she is, while the other woman mutters how annoying they are. The woman opens the door. She throws the elderly lady into the tiger's cage. The sobbing lady hears the woman telling the tiger to enjoy its meal. The tiger approaches the lady and devours her entirely, leaving nothing behind. The woman in blue remarks how cute the tiger is and tells it to enjoy its meal. She then wonders aloud if it's really enough or if they should give it more, but the woman in gray says no, that one will suffice. The two hear something moving behind them. A car arrives at the location and the woman in blue says it seems the managers are here. A stylish man steps out of the car, activates the alarm and greets everyone present. His name is Mlim and he is the Manager of the Yup branch. The others greet him and someone asks how his trip was. He replies that no one would believe the beautiful creatures he captured. One of them says he's the best and he asks for everyone's attention because he has good news. He opens a briefcase and announces that they've finally completed the project. He pulls out a pistol containing a suspicious liquid and declares the prototype of success. Someone asks if it is what they think it is and he asks if they remember the cockatrice that escaped in Bin. He explains that they managed to create a mutant by inserting a mana crystal, but the body wasn't strong enough. Additionally, the mutant was difficult to control. He continues saying this time things will be different. As he looks at the tiger, he shoots the tiger and declares he will make it something precious. An explosion erupts in the tiger's cage. The tiger that was shot begins to emanate an intense energy. Mlim smiles, satisfied with the results he's seeing. Someone starts clapping and a ripple effect occurs, causing everyone else to clap as well. While looking at the new creature he just created, he remarks that he never thought he'd have the chance to witness something so beautiful. The scene shifts again, this time to Incheon, a rank 4 area. Some people are walking peacefully, however Sihu and Jihan appear and Sihu comments that unlike last time this area has a barrier. Jihan explains that they determined it would take longer to deal with the tigers, especially after the Yupk incident. While Jihan talks about getting lucky and finding another crystal, Sashimi shows up behind him. Sashimi, looking worn out, asks where Jihan was yesterday. Sihu is startled and warns Jihan while he just greets Sashimi casually. Sashimi complains that Jihan made him carry all the tigers and then simply disappeared afterward. Jihan apologizes, but Sashimi retorts asking if that's all he's going to say. Out of nowhere Sashimi starts trembling violently and then even more suddenly he starts acting hysterical. CA asks what's wrong with him, saying he's acting like a lunatic. Sashimi, holding up his phone, tells them to stay calm. After seeing what he has to show, both of them start screaming like maniacs. After seeing it, Sashimi, thrilled, announces that both the tigers and the cockas sold out quickly. Siru, shocked by the sheer number of zeros on the screen, exclaims that it's 500 million won, and Sashimi, standing behind, says it was the grand prize. See her kneels, admitting she made the right decision hiring him, and Sashimi confidently says that anything he cleans will always generate profit. After their conversation, Sashimi mentions that it's time to revisit their contract and demands a 10% fee. Jihan cuts him off, saying it'll be 4%, and Sashimi protests. Still protesting, Sashimi argues that even in cleanup there are certain policies to follow. But Jihan keeps shouting 4%. A negotiation ensues with Sashimi suggesting 8%, but Jihan firmly responds 4%. Sashimi accuses Jihan of blatantly robbing him, but Jihan concludes by saying all right, let's settle on 4%. Sashimi, bewildered, asks why he's negotiating with himself. The only rational one among them asks what the two fools are doing, and someone in the background says there she is again. She quickly turns around, wondering who it could be. First a paw is shown, then an exceptionally unique rat appears. Sihu is disappointed, realizing it's just a chinchilla. Some people ask if she's what others call a tamer, and another person nearby asks if they've never seen her before and introduces her as Yuri, men from the Snowflake Guild. Others mention she's famous for hunting saber-toothed tigers, and someone asks why. The answer given is that they have no idea. Meanwhile, Yuri walks past the three fools from Epic Guild. Su, however, seems to develop a little crush on Yuri Min. Jihan tells them not to waste time and urges them to head to the Ma, explaining that the tamer in front of them is known for being a saber-toothed tiger specialist. If they don't hurry, the saber-toothed tigers will all be captured by the chinchilla. While Jihan speaks, the chinchilla suddenly appears right behind him. Noticing it, he asks what the hell is it doing behind me. After the chinchilla ends up behind the protagonist, it opens its mouth wide, revealing its teeth. Siu and Sashimi quickly urge him to get out of the way. Jihan, however, calmly tells them not to worry, assuring them it won't hurt him. At that moment a window activates, calculating the chances of him being attacked by the chinchilla. Sashimi and Siu are utterly disgusted by the scene they've just witnessed. The chinchilla's owner remarks that this behavior is strange and that it rarely shows interest in others. The woman in front of them introduces herself, saying it's a pleasure to meet them and her name is Yuri Min, a member of the Snowflake Guild. Now it's Jihan's turn to introduce himself. He says his name is Jihan Yu, a member of Epic, and that the woman beside him is Epic's leader Ch Kim. Yuri asks if the protagonist has a pet hamster or any other rodents at home. Jihan responds that he doesn't have any pets. Yuri notes that her chinchilla's behavior is unusual and suggests there must be a reason. Meanwhile, Sashimi calls out to her. He takes Yuri's hand and starts introducing himself, saying his name is Sashimi and that he works in monster cleanup services. He says If she ever needs a cleanup service she can just call him, and she replies that it's fine. Sashimi assures her there's no need to worry. This time the chinchilla appears angrily behind him. Some bystanders appear in the background watching the situation unfold. Poor Sashimi is being ignored, and the bystanders comment that they've never seen Yuri talking to people from another guild and that she's usually not friendly. However, the bystanders shift the topic, asking if those two aren't the ones who were talking to Doha. The protagonist turns his back and notes that people are starting to notice them. Yuri realizes she's drawn a lot of attention and apologizes for it. As she leaves she wishes the three of them good luck, and the protagonist does the same. However, in his thoughts the protagonist starts mentioning the guild and Yuri's name. He notes that it's been almost 3 years since there was any news about Snowflake, and with their reputation they should be in rank 3. He wonders why she's still in rank 4. He admits guessing isn't his job. Jihan then calls Isayu and says they should go inside, and she agrees. He tells the cleanup guy not to disappear, and Sashimi responds okay. The scene shifts, showing a building named Green Cape. The two enter the building. Sia mentions that something feels off. They're already on the 5th floor, yet they haven't encountered a single monster. Jihan suggests that maybe they took too long and other guilds already passed through. Standing in front of the staircase, the protagonist says they'll have to search each floor. As they go up, her asks why they don't take the elevator, and Jihan guesses it might not be working, so the two start climbing, and see who complains that he made a mage climb stairs, to which Jihan replies that every mage should work on their stamina. As they ascend, a bystander appears asking who's there. He asks who the two of them are. His name is Gu Man, a member of the Knife Guild. Gun asks if they didn't see the sign on the 1st floor saying this building is protected by the Knife Guild from floors 27 to 209. See who, furious, says they can't just decide these things, and Gon responds that he can't deal with smaller guilds. Guy Mun explains that it's an unspoken rule allowing them to claim these areas to secure the best moss. He adds that when a large guild claims these locations, lower-ranking guilds don't have much choice. He says this applies to a 2-member guild like theirs and tells them to leave immediately. Jihan responds that no, they're the ones who will leave. Jihan declares he'll report them because everyone knows it's illegal to claim Eris, and Guy Manon tells him to shut the hell up. Guy Mun asks if Jihan really thinks the association will do anything. Jihan asks if that's a threat. While starting to observe the people around him, he notes that there's a tank, 2 warriors, and a mage. He continues in his thoughts, realizing it will be hard for all 4 of them to come down at once since the staircase isn't wide. He activates his ability and starts calculating the chances of winning. Another bystander asks so what if they are, as they face off a window shows an 80% success rate. Guy Man wonders what's happening and why Jihan isn't moving. Gun turns around and asks the mage why he's just standing there and orders him to help. The mage responds that he knows and is about to start attacking. Jihan quickly calls for Sayu. She responds that she's ready. While casting a spell, the two launch their water and fire spells. An explosion occurs, releasing energy. The explosion damages the building, and part of it bursts outside. Jihan and Su begin running up the stairs as fast as they can. The bystanders shout that they're running away. Su casts another spell at the bystanders. A circle of flame surrounds the bystanders, leaving them unsure of what to do. Meanwhile, Jihan leaps toward God, ready to strike. Guy blocks Jihan's attack. Guy questions what someone like him is doing in a rank 4 area. The protagonist replies that he talks too much and points out that his body is completely exposed. Guy is struck directly and falls to the ground. Guy ends up where he never should have left, on the ground. He asks if the two of them think they'll get away and scathed for messing with them, and what his guild will do when they hear about this. Jihan cuts him off, asking about his guild while driving his sword into the ground next to Guy's head. Jihan then asks what his guild would do for a dead man. A figure appears between the two and tells Guy they aren't strong enough to face them. Sia asks if she should finish this once and for all, and another bystander wonders how she can cast so many spells. He asks who these two are. 2 more bystanders appear, with one urging the other to hurry up and put out the fire, while the other says he's not good with water magic. A bald bystander complains that they haven't even seen a tiger yet and are already wasting energy on this nonsense. As he says this, he turns to check what might be behind him. A woman uses a water spell to extinguish the flames. As she turns back, declaring the fire finally out, she sees a mutant tiger Devouring the bald bystander caught in the tiger's jaws, he cries for help. After witnessing the horrific scene, the woman starts running away. Soo and Jihan hear screams and note they're coming from the emergency stairs. She asks if he thinks it could be a saber-toothed tiger, but he replies that for the screams to be this loud it must be something else. The protagonist activates his abilities again. A window appears, calculating his chances of surviving the encounter. At that moment the tiger appears, where they are covered in what can only be described as bystander ketchup. The tiger roars. The horrifying saber-toothed tiger lets out another roar directed at Jihan and Siu. The window reappears, showing a survival chance of only 0.5%. The mutant charges toward them. Seo asks if that's a tiger and Jihan replies that it's a very powerful mutant. Jihan comments that he's never seen mutants like this one and that it's different from the others. Guy and the bystander meanwhile are paralyzed in shock, wondering what that creature is. Jihan quickly turns and tells them he needs their help to fight this thing. Guy, running away, says it's not enough, and that even 4 people wouldn't be able to take down the mutant. Jihan calls them cowards. The protagonist admits that just he and C aren't enough to defeat the mutant. The monster stomps the ground, shattering it into pieces as it charges toward them. Jihan warns Seo that it's coming quickly. Jihan draws his sword at the last moment. He barely manages to block the mutant's attack. He notes how strong the mutant is, saying his sword almost broke if not for the elemental power imbued in it. Jihan declares he needs to end this quickly with a single strike. While lost in thought, the mutant swings its razor-sharp claws at him. However, Seo manages to cast her spell just in time to save Jihan. She tells him this is his chance and urges him to attack with all his strength. He strikes using his skill to immute his sword with his elemental's power, but the attack has no effect on the mutant. The mutant retaliates, slamming Jihan in the head and sending him flying, coughing up ketchup. Jihan groans, saying he didn't even see that hit coming. C, who attempts to attack the monster using her wind arrow ability. The mutant notices the arrows heading toward it and effortlessly dodges all the arrows Seo conjures with no other options. Seo admits there's no way to block the incoming attack in time. At that moment Yuri Min and her chinchilla arrive to save the day. The chinchilla charges at the mutant. It saves C just in time and the two begin to face off. The chinchilla manages to throw the ferocious feline away. C, who looking at the hole, says the chinchilla saved her just in time. Yuri Min then explains that she heard a nearby explosion and didn't expect to find the two of them. Yuri Min greets them again and Sia simply remarks that it's Yuri Min from Snowflake. Meanwhile Yuri looks at Jihan and says he's in terrible shape. She tells Seo to grab Jihan and get him out of there as she'll handle the mutant herself. C, who however suggests calling for other heroes. Yuri Min reassures her, saying it's fine as no saber-toothed tiger is a match for her. C, who notices that Yuri's eyes and tone of voice have changed after their exchange. Yuri leaps off the building, heading straight for the mutant. The chinchilla meanwhile is putting heavy pressure on the tiger. The tiger takes a punch so strong that it spits ketchup. Another flurry of blows follows, each accompanied by more ketchup. Yuri midair from her jump calls out to Chilla, who promptly looks at her, pointing at the mutant. She casts a spell. The spell fires directly at the tiger. Chilla, who had been pummeling the tiger, steps aside, allowing Yuri's attacks to hit it. The tiger becomes encased in ice for a few minutes. It eventually shatters the ice and escapes. Yuri moves toward Chilla and remarks that even after her attack the mutant can still move. This one is on a whole other level. Meanwhile the mutant charges toward the two of them once again. Yuri fires another ice attack. This time the attack is faster, however it's still not fast enough to hit the mutant, which dodges everything. Even with the tiger advancing toward her, Yuri knows there's a weakness in it somewhere. The mutant tiger collapses after being struck at the knee joint. She states it won't be able to move for quite some time. She explains that saber-toothed tigers possess extraordinary physical strength. She adds that their flexibility is a natural trait they inherited, but when their muscles contract due to the cold their joints can't support their own weight. Yuri then declares to the tiger that the fight is over and that its mistake was letting the ice arrows hit. It's C, who observing from above comments on how amazing Yuri is and how neither of them stood a chance. The battered protagonist calls out to Se, who goes to him. He tells her she needs to help Yuri, but C, who replies that there's no need since Yuri has already defeated the saber-toothed tiger. Jihan however disagrees, saying the fight is far from over. Jihan activates his ability and begins calculating Yuri's chances of victory. As Yuri moves to finish off the tiger, Jihan continues to think. She's in serious trouble. Yuri says she'll grant the tiger a painless death. Out of nowhere the beast gets up furious. More saber-toothed tigers emerge around them. A window appears showing the success rate has dropped below 10%. All the saber-toothed cats charge toward Yuri, ready to kill her. Watching from above, Jihan notes that all the saber-toothed tigers have converged there. The protagonist declares it's do or die. Now, because there are no other options left, he asks Su if she can use levitation to get them down, and she responds that she can, but she's not very skilled at it. Jihan embraces her and tells her to activate it on his signal. Blushing, she calls out his name. Jihan, holding the glowing green sphere, says this is their only option. He jumps off the building holding Su in his arms. He activates his ability called Haste as they fall from the building. Sia pleads for him to wait, and says he should at least explain the plan first. Now in free fall, the saber-toothed tigers prepare to attack. However, spells begin to rain down on the tigers. The caster of these spells is Yumin, but while she's distracted, one of the tigers appears behind her. Chilla arrives just in time, saving her from the attack. Both Chilla and Yuri Min find themselves surrounded by the saber-toothed tigers. Exhausted from the battle with the tigers, Yuri says they just keep coming, and it feels like there's no end to this long fight. Amid the swarm of tigers, she says she needs to find the mutant quickly before it attacks her or heals itself. However, she hears a type of noise coming from above. The noise she hears is from the two fools who jumped off the building. Jihan quickly asks Su to use her levitation as fast as possible, and so she does. See who uses her levitation. However, Jihan notices that she managed to slow down the fall, but she wouldn't be able to stop it completely, so he decides to use his own mana to stop it, even though he knows he should conserve it. C asks if it worked. Jihan prepares his attack and says he has his sights on the exact spot ahead. He adds that all he needs to do is cut like he did with the mutant cockatrice. Then he unleashes his attacks on all the saber-toothed tigers in his sights. The ground around them is completely destroyed and the two fools are finally on the ground, safe from the fall. However, Jihan is exhausted from using so much of his mana. Yuri Min comes running toward them and says she told them to stay out of this fight. Thus Jihan asks if that's all she has to say to the people who came to help her. She retorts that she didn't need their help and that she had it under control. Then Jian asks what her problem is with the tigers. Chilla looks at the protagonist angrily and See who notices. See who warns them that the attack didn't hit all the tigers and that they should be careful. Then Jihan says that these aren't the same tigers as before and somehow the mutant is summoning more tigers to the battle. Yuri Min states that his joints should be completely messed up and Jihan speculates that he might be able to regenerate somehow. She replies that she has never seen a power that could regenerate before. For a brief moment she recaps things that happened in the past. A girl covered in ketchup tells her to leave while she's lost in her memories. The protagonist warns that the mutant has taken a lot of damage and that they can finish this quickly. As he speaks, Yuri Min starts running toward the mutant. The protagonist calls out to her, but she doesn't hear and keeps running. This leaves the protagonist questioning why she suddenly went crazy and started acting on her own. He turns back and asks her to cover him and she responds that she will. The tigers charge toward Yuri Min, however she casts her spells and manages to take a good number of them down. Now she's about to face the mutant and begins casting more spells. Another tiger appears trying to grab her foot, however she tells them to get out of her way, while tossing them aside like rag dolls. It's at this moment as she lowers her guard that the mutant charges at her with its claws. She realizes that the mutant has regenerated at an incredibly fast rate. The tiger, now roaring, continues attacking her. Meanwhile, Jihan, as he launches an attack, says that eating her might not be a good idea. He jokes that cold food might upset the mutant's stomach. Not wasting any time, Jihan gets closer and unleashes more attacks on the mutant. This time it seems the attacks hit and cause damage to the mutant. Chilla takes the opportunity to help Jihan as well and See who ends up doing the same as Chilla. Then as Jihan charges toward the mutant, he declares that this is its end. However, Yuri Min appears in front of him and tells him not to kill the mutant. He manages to stop his attack in time and asks what she's doing, saying he needs to attack before it regenerates. She says she needs to capture the mutant alive and that killing it isn't an option. Jihan asks if that's her plan and tells her to get out of his way. Then he asks another question: why is she doing this? In the meantime, during their Conversation. The mutant gets up. It charges toward Yuri Min, ready to devour her. Si-Hu and Jihan stand frozen, wondering what the hell she's doing. The mutant lets out another roar, and Si-Hu warns that with each roar more tigers appear. Jihan becomes pensive, trying to figure out what to do since he's out of mana. Someone in the background says that this is pathetic. The person behind the voice uses their gravity ability. Jihan then asks who it is. The person responds that he's still an amateur, and Jian instantly recognizes who it is. With that, the person continues, saying that even though Jihan passed the rank for exam, he's still weak and a disappointment. Another bystander comments that he's not such an impressive prodigy after all, and a young woman says she's impressed that he managed to hold out for so long. Those who came to help the protagonists are Sane's crew, and he immediately tells them to stop talking and finish things quickly. The guy behind the creation of the mutant says he was expecting this to happen and guesses they must be the Dice Guild crew of level 3. Then Lim says he expected them to at least send a level 1 squad. Miss Lim's assistant asks how to proceed now, and he replies that there's nothing they can do to retreat. He adds that this wasn't a total loss even though the mana crystal had spread throughout the body in the last few minutes. He remarks that the power of the mana crystal is very impressive and quite fascinating. In the end, he says to continue with the plan as originally programmed. Suin crew, witnessing the grotesque scene, asks what's happening to the mutant, and Suin says it seems like the hero department is going to have more work again. Then Jihan appears, being carried by other extras who came along. They head towards Sayu, but she says she doesn't need help and that she's fine. Chilla and Yuri Min were standing still when they sense the different presence. One of them looks around to see what it is. The scene changes, and it's shown that a week has passed. Jihan holds his phone as the day's news is displayed. Someone asks what happened inside. Sishi appears, saying the ma they did is all over the news, and asks why Jihan is so beat up. Jihan replies that civilians can't know. Sashimi insists he deserves to know since they're partners. Jihan thinks to himself that he shouldn't have hired him. Then it's explained what happened that day. 8 heroes died in anime. The hero department underestimated the number of saber-toothed tigers. The appearance of a mutant triggered an infestation of tigers. The result was an unprecedented tragedy, and the protagonist says he's felt bad ever since. He adds that everything that happened was planned to seem like just a random incident, but reiterates that the mutant was different from all the others. He then says that maybe he shouldn't dwell too much on it and that the hero department will release the investigation results. Sashimi comments that he hasn't seen SCU today. To this, Jihan replies that she went to take care of some things and will be back soon. However, someone starts calling him. Sashimi remarks that he's never seen anyone call that phone before, and Jihan explains it's used to communicate with all the guild's heroes. But why would someone call Epic on this line? He answers and says Epic, asking how he can help. The person on the other end cuts him off and says hi. She introduces herself as Yuri Min from Snowflake. Jian asks if it's really Yuri Min, and Sashimi is shocked. Then Jihan asks what he owes the call to. Sashimi jokingly asks for his popcorn. Yuri Min apologizes for using this line, saying it was the only way to contact him, and Jihan says it's fine. Jihan then asks how her injuries are, and she replies that most of them have almost healed. She asks how he's feeling, and he says he's feeling fine. He senses something is off due to her uneasiness. He wonders if she would use this line just to check on him. Then she says what she's about to say is sudden, but she asks if they could go on a date today. Sashimi, eating his popcorn, screams, asking if it's today and saying it's impossible. The scene shifts to a building. C, who appears talking to her father. She asks how he's doing. He responds that he heard she had a battle with a mutant in an MA zone and asks if she's hurt, to which she replies that she's not. Then he scolds her, saying she should be more careful and reminding her that supports are the most common targets. She asks him to stop because he said this over and over again. He repeats that if something goes wrong she should run without looking back. C, who tells him to stop. He says it's good to know she's partnered with someone reliable. Blushing, she admits that Jihan has indeed been a great help to her and the guild, and she tells her father that if she hadn't met Jihan she might still be stuck in the same place. He agrees. Her father is introduced as Giano Kim, the head of research in Kyoto, Tokyo. He says he'd like to meet Jihan someday. Additionally, he mentions that Jihan is a hero who inherited his mother's powers and that he has many questions for him. His assistant appears and tells him he needs to review the sample that arrived. He replies that he's on his way and asks her to go ahead. Then he tells his daughter he has to hang up now, but she asks him to wait and inquires when he's coming to Korea. He responds that it will be on the anniversary of her mother's death. She complains that he hung up on her and says that's typical of him. She stretches and says she needs To finish the housework quickly, her phone starts ringing and she wonders why he's calling. The scene changes again. This time Jihan is dressed to the nines and looking incredibly charming. It's shown that before leaving, Sashimi gave Jihan a good luck charm and Jihan asks what kind of luck it's supposed to bring. He says he's only wearing it because Sashimi wouldn't stop pestering him about it. While distracted, Yuri Min calls out to him. She asks if she kept him waiting long. Once again in his thoughts he remarks that she really looks very different from the Ma. He replies that he just got there and she says that's a relief. After the small talk about who arrived first or was late, she mentions that she made reservations at a restaurant. Sashimi, munching on popcorn, tells Se-Hu that they're going out for lunch together. Se-Hu, jealous, asks what the protagonist thinks he's doing. Filled with jealousy, she thinks this is all part of Yuri's plan to steal Jihan and wonders how Yuri has the audacity to do this after aiming arrows at them. Se-Hu believes that as the guild master this is definitely unacceptable. The scene shifts again, this time inside the restaurant where Jihan and Yuri Men are enjoying their meal. Meanwhile, Yuri ments that the coffee smells really good and Jihan agrees. Seo continues thinking to herself that this is definitely unacceptable. Jihan compliments you on her accurate dark throws. Then Jihan asks if she wants him to carry the teddy bear, but she says it's fine and that she doesn't need help. Sashimi says the situation looks really suspicious and Se-Hu stays silent. Then punching Sashimi, she declares that this is definitely a date between the two of them. Sashimi, his face bruised, asks if she's not going to do anything about it. She replies that she sees no reason to interfere with who Jihan chooses to date. Still, she keeps thinking that she shouldn't interfere but wonders why she feels this way. The focus shifts back to Jihan and Yuri again. Jihan says he had fun and Yuri says she feels better now. The protagonist then says she should just tell him why she called him there today and she asks what he means. He reiterates that she didn't invite him there just to hang out. She admits that she was waiting for him to say something and reveals the truth. She says she was hoping he'd go somewhere with her. The protagonist guesses a hospital and she confirms it, saying that her sister is receiving treatment there. The two enter the hospital and the protagonist wonders if something happened to her sister. He asks for permission to enter the room. Out of nowhere his ability activates. Yuri explains that the person in the room is her sister and her name is Son. The window, which previously calculated percentages, now displays the girl's condition. The protagonist thinks to himself, what is mana deaeration syndrome? She then explains that the reason she wanted to keep the tigers alive is because of her sister. She accounts that they were attacked by tigers 4 years ago and since then her sister has been in a coma. She says the doctors don't know why. Jihan comments that this is why she's been relentlessly pursuing the tigers. She confirms it, saying she hoped to find an answer if she kept going. However, she admits that she's been mistaken this whole time. She says she believed the mutant factor could help her find a cure for her sister. However, after reading today's reports she realized there's no connection. She apologizes for her behavior that day, admitting that because of it Se-Hu and Jihan were put in danger. He says not to worry and that he now understands why she acted that way. Then Jihan's ability activates again and this time it calculates how crucial Yuri is to Epic's expansion. In his thoughts Jihan says that Epic needs her. The protagonist says this has happened before. On the day he met Sashimi, a flashback is shown of him telling Se-Hu to stop. And during that flashback it's also shown how crucial Sashimi would be for Epic. However, Jihan says it feels like his ability is guiding him to achieve his revenge. He remarks that he's never seen his ability work that way before. He admits he only hired Sashimi to understand how the ability functioned, but now the same thing has happened a second time, only with Yuri Min. Still deep in thought he reflects that if he's found 1 out of 4 it means Yuri Min is necessary to complete the group and that he needs to find 3 more. Lost in his thoughts and overwhelmed by what he just witnessed, Yuri notices that he looks unwell and asks if something's wrong. He replies that he's just feeling a little dizzy. He continues thinking about how when his ability first calculated Epic's chances of becoming great it was 99%, but now there are additional requirements. Jihan, slowly feeling weaker, says he didn't realize using his ability so much could affect him. Nevertheless, he concludes that if this is what's needed, so be it. Jihan asks Yuri how many years she's been hunting the tigers and she replies it's been around 4 years. He continues pointing out that during those 4 years she hasn't found any answers about how to wake her sister. She confirms this. Jihan says he doesn't know much about the approach she's been using but thinks it's time to change since she hasn't found anything yet. She asks what kind of approach he's suggesting. He explains that he'll give her an example, rolling up his sleeve. He says that in cases of cuts or wounds the proper thing is to disinfect them and apply an ointment, but does she "Know what's in those ointments?" Yuri replies that she doesn't know. Jihan explains that it's just a common ingredient called Centella asiatica, also known as Indian penart. He adds that it's a common plant that can be found anywhere with mountains and fields. This plant has antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties among other benefits. He goes on to explain that while plants haven't turned into monsters, some researchers believe this might happen soon, and it's not the plant stems that are useful for treating open wounds or cuts, it's actually the plant extracts that truly help. Yuri comments that it's interesting to think about it that way, and that while the plant has nothing to do with her injuries, it's still useful in some way. Looking at her sister, Yuri says this might be relevant to her situation, but it might also not be, and it doesn't really connect to the tigers in his thoughts. The protagonist says that Yuri already knew all of this before he explained, but she chose to keep moving forward. He reflects on how her intentions were stronger and her fixation on avenging the creature that put her sister in that state. The protagonist then says he has a proposal for her. She asks a proposal. He says he'd like to recruit her for Epic. She questions what she asks, if he wants her to join Epic, and he replies yes. He explains that if she agrees to join, he'll help with her sister's treatment. Blushing, she listens as he assures her it's not an empty promise but a contract that he can help her. His ability is then shown. Calcula the chances of him being able to help them. However, this time his ability isn't helping much and only shows the same thing as before. Still, he says he needs to recruit her no matter what. She asks for some time to think about his proposal. Jihan responds that it's fine and that she can take as much time as she needs. After their conversation, he says the best thing to do now is to let her process all this information. He says he has to leave now, and she apologizes for bringing him there to hear about her family case. Looking at his wrist, he remembers the amulet Sashimi gave him. As he takes off the amulet, he says he'd like to give something to her, and she in turn asks what. He says he'll give her the amulet meant to bring good luck and suggests she give it to her sister. She thanks him and says her sister loves these kinds of things. As he leaves the hospital, he says he hopes to see her again. She, happy and blushing, waves goodbye to him. The scene changes again and another large building is shown. This time people are gathered in a room. 3 individuals are introduced. One of them says they are late. The person who says this is Young Park, the owner of Kiro's. A bystander on the microphone says they've been waiting for too long. Young Park states that the meeting should proceed even if one guild is absent. Doha asks what kind of person schedules a meeting at this hour. He adds that it's not like there's anyone important there anyway. Doha's assistant remarks that they should have arrived faster, and he replies that he already has enough to worry about and questions why he even has to be there. A bystander tells Doha that for someone who arrived late he has a lot to say. The bystander is Hunan, the leader of the Warriors Guild, and he tells Doha that everyone there has been waiting for him. Doha retorts that someone must have risen from the dead and comments that he thought Hun's entire guild had been wiped out in the rank 1MA. Once again Hunan stands up angrily and says that's not enough to bring down his guild and that they cleared that Ma years ago. Another bystander in the background asks them to lower their voices. The bystander remarks that even as guild leaders they are still immature. The speaker is Gengen, the owner of the Red Hall Guild, and he tells Doha that he thought Doha had learned his lesson after being saved by him. Doha, furious, asks if Gengen has a problem with him and suggests settling it outside. Gengen replies that he doesn't and questions why he would waste his time on someone weak. A rivalry between them is then shown. A total of 103 matches with 52 wins and 51 losses for Gengen and 51 wins and 52 losses for Doha. A female bystander remarks that they act like a pair of children. She asks why men always feel the need to prove their worth. This bystander is Myojo Kim, the owner of the Snowball Guild. Doha then says it's been a while since he's seen Myojo Kim, estimating it's been around 3 years. Mujo gets angry when she hears Doha comment that her new look makes her seem old, and she asks him who he's calling old. Doha, however, says things are as they've always been, and his assistant comments that no woman wants to hear that she looks old. The narrator announces that now that everyone is present the meeting will begin. He explains that the reason he called everyone was due to another major level incident in Inkan. He continues, revealing that this time they found evidence that the Yup was behind the incident. Everyone is shocked upon hearing those words. Doha exclaims, "Those damn protesters." He adds that this means they might be able to storm the Yup headquarters with weapons. Still in the meeting about the attack involving the Yup, someone tells Doha to think before speaking. Myojo tells Doha that there's not much they can do with so little evidence and questions why he thinks the guilds haven't taken action against them. The narrator agrees, stating that Miss Myojo is right and that with limited evidence they can't do anything and must be cautious. He then asks everyone to look at the screen because the presentation isn't over. He introduces the saber-toothed tiger mutant that appeared in Incan. The other bystanders ask what kind of monstrosity that is, saying they've never seen anything like it before. Gengen speaks up, remarking that the creature is grotesque on its own. Once again the narrator states that based on its appearance this mutant is atypical compared to others, and that the hero department has been receiving reports of similar mutants. He continues, mentioning that the reports include mutants like the red spider found on Mount Jiang. He also notes an increase in carnivorous plants in a private field, stating that all these mutants appeared after the saber-toothed tiger mutant. After the explanation, Hunan asks what the point is of telling them all this, as it's not uncommon for different monsters to appear. The background narrator says it's true, and that based solely on appearance these monsters haven't become special cases. However, he explains that with DNA analysis the monsters reveal a genetic modification unique to the tiger mutant. Main asks what kind of new modification this is and tells him to get straight to the point, so the background narrator gets to the point and says that mana crystals are the modification. He continues, saying that as everyone there knows a mutant must have a mana crystal. He explains that the research department has determined that what they call mutants are born with a large amount of mana that fuses. He further states that mana crystals are still being thoroughly researched, and with the materials they currently have it's not possible to create such a thing. However, the mana crystal found in the saber-toothed tiger mutant was artificially made and was recreated to be transformed into liquid. The extras start asking if he's sure about what he's saying, with one pointing out that he himself said they don't have the technology to do such things. Doha's assistant asks if he knows anything about this, and he replies that he doesn't know much, only that it works for elementals. In his thoughts, Doha says this is the reason so many mutants are appearing, and that this is an experiment to transform mana into liquid. After finishing his thoughts, Doha tells everyone that it's clear who is behind these things. Gengen says this is interesting, but that they need something more to approach it in that way. Therefore he asks what the Yup has to do with it, and reminds them that at the beginning the background narrator said he had evidence against them. The background narrator explains that on the day of the incident several suspicious individuals were seen inside the Ma. He states that they have images of these people captured by drones, and that the person they're now seeing was identified through facial recognition. The background narrator introduces this person as M. Lim, 33 years old, who is believed to be one of the managers of the Yup. He adds that until 4 years ago M. Lim was a researcher in the magical engineering department. However, the background narrator mentions that there are records of him being dismissed for causing disturbances. Gengen repeats the word disturbances and asks what Ms. Lim did again. The background narrator explains that the record sure stole one of the mana crystals from the research center and conducted illegal experiments on humans based on the evidence gathered. The association has identified Mlim as the main suspect to capture him as quickly as possible. They are asking all the guilds present for help in apprehending him. Leaving the meeting, the scene shifts to a bus stop. Jihan, while waiting, overhears some extras talking about his clothes and how handsome he looks. One of the extras asks if he's a hero, and another responds questioning why a hero would take a bus. It's then shown that Jihan is texting someone. He wonders why she's not replying to his messages and thinks he needs to talk to her. In his thoughts he says that although he hasn't gotten a response from Yuri about his offer, it might be better if he could tell C that he wants to recruit her. He continues thinking that even without the information from his ability, having someone like Yuri in the guild would be great. Coming back to his thoughts, he says the only problem is that they don't have money, and bringing someone like Yuri on board would be expensive, but there's still some money left from the monster sashimi dealt with, and maybe they can negotiate a fair price to pay her. While he's standing there thinking, a car pulls up and someone asks if he's getting in. He quickly responds yes. He asks to driver if he can drop him off at the building on the 5th corner down the street, and the driver says yes. The driver then asks if he's a hero, and Jihan replies that he is. The driver laughs, saying he never thought he'd have a hero as a passenger and that he's going to brag about it to everyone. Jihan says it's nice of him to say that. However, the driver comments that judging by his appearance Jihan must be a member of some famous guild, and asks if he's from Warriors Red Hall or maybe even Dice. A bit embarrassed, Jihan responds that he's actually from a small guild called Epic. Then he thinks that the guy has probably never heard of their guild. The driver, overhearing this, repeats the name Epic and asks if it's the guild that dealt With all the saber-toothed tigers in the Green Cape apartments, Jihan asks how he knows that. The driver replies that he actually lives there, and Jihan asks if he really does. The driver, still speaking, says it's just a coincidence. Both fall silent and Jihan observes the driver. Then the driver comments that it's a bad day for luck seeing something like that. At this point a hybrid is shown walking into an alley. The driver adds that hybrids give him the creeps. Jihan asks why, and the driver questions if he has heard the rumors. Jihan, hearing all of this, says she looks like a regular high school student. The driver replies that student or not, that isn't considered a person. The driver continues saying that for heroes hybrids might seem different, however for ordinary humans if hybrids attack they'll be dead in seconds. In his thoughts Jihan admits he can understand much of what the man is saying. Continuing his internal dialogue, Jihan reflects that during the invasion humans were attacked by all sorts of things, and it's understandable that some fear remained. However, he thinks that person is still just a child and shouldn't be judged, questioning how such judgment could be morally right. At that moment he thinks of Se Hu and realizes she must have lived with this fear for much of her life. He snaps back to his senses and notices something strange. He sees some people following the girl and Jihan begins to suspect something. He quickly asks the driver to stop the car, but the driver says they're close to the requested location and reminds him that he hasn't paid yet. The girl, unaware of the people following her, continues walking as usual until she finally looks back and notices the people behind her. She quickly starts running away. The foolish men shout for someone to catch her. One of them approaches and covers her mouth with a cloth, making her scream for help. The men attempting to kidnap her call her a young hybrid and say she's their lucky jackpot. They remark that the VIPs will be pleased when they deliver her. Jihan arrives and asks what they think they're doing. He warns them, saying he'll count to 3 and if they don't let her go they'll all die. He quickly jumps toward the men, counting 1 2 3 very fast. The men shout back saying he should count to 3 properly. However, Jihan is stopped by someone who has just arrived at the scene. This time it's a bulky thug who seems eager to die at Jihan's hands. The man tells him not to interfere with their business. Jihan questions who this abomination is, with Jihan fighting the bulky thug in the alley. The scene shifts to Epic's headquarters. A phone on the table starts receiving numerous messages. Sue notices the phone vibrating non-stop and checks what's going on. Sashimi asks why she isn't responding to Jihan's messages. She replies that it's not from him but from debt collectors. She adds that she has no reason to ignore his messages. Sashimi jokes that she's still jealous once again. She wonders why he's taking so long to arrive and why he keeps sending messages. See who is shocked by the messages about someone being kidnapped. The scene shifts back to the alley where Jihan is. The men stand there holding the hybrid while the bulky thug blocks Jihan's path. However, Jihan asks if the thug works with the guys kidnapping the girl and warns that if he steps aside he won't be implicated. Ji Jian is interrupted as the thug tells him to get out of the way. The thug charges at Jihan, saying it's time for him to die. In his thoughts Jihan realizes that this guy isn't someone you can reason with. The bulky thug stupidly declares that the hero isn't there anymore. Suddenly Jihan appears behind him and says the hero you're looking for is right behind you. The thug turns and claims the hero is already dead. However, Jihan manages to defend himself just in time from the rock attack the thug was about to land. A power begins to emanate from the bulky thug. Jihan remarks that the thug definitely performed a man-infused attack, as it wouldn't make sense for him to have blocked otherwise. Still lost in his thoughts, Jihan wonders if the muscular guy might also be a hero. The extras who were watching the fight start getting into the van with the girl while Jihan was thinking about what to do to prevent the guys from escaping. The muscular extra prepared a punch and warned him not to look away. Jihan makes a small jump to dodge the stone hurl by the muscular guy. He comments that he'd like to minimize damage to the neighborhood considering it's a civilian area, but he sees no choice and realizes he'll have to use another 1% of his power as he's thinking about how he needs to take down the muscular extra with one attack. Another person appears saying that's enough. The newcomer adds that he can't let the two of them destroy the alley. He further says that Jihan is lucky they're in a hurry since they usually kill any witnesses. Jihan questions if everyone there is involved in this scheme. However, the white-haired guy asks if the muscular one forgot their orders to complete the mission, quietly scolding him for causing trouble on his first job. The white-haired guy says that maybe the boss will need to have a word with the muscular one, to which the latter replies that it's unnecessary. The muscular guy then punches a wall, sending bricks flying toward Jihan. After their exchange, both the muscular guy and the white-haired ones say maybe next time and they vanish. Jihan, putting away his swords, remarks that they're gone and wonders who they were and what their goals are. Using his leaping ability, Jihan pulls a Spider-Man and starts climbing the surrounding buildings. As he levitates, he activates his ability, wondering which path he should take to catch up with the van. He is jumping from building to building, saying that if he keeps using his ability he might be able to find the way. His phone starts ringing while he's searching for the van. The caller is Sue and he asks if she's heading to the address. She confirms and asks him to explain the kidnapping. Jihan explains that he saw a hybrid girl being kidnapped and who responds that she's on her way and will call the cops for help. Before hanging up, Jihan tells her to be careful without many words. who begins questioning what she just heard. Lost in thought, she notes that someone of another species was kidnapped and reflects on the recent rise in such crimes. Still pondering, she wonders why this is happening to half-humans. The van Jihan was looking for is parked in an abandoned location. As he approaches, he says he finally found them. Getting closer to the van, he confirms it's indeed the one he was looking for. Upon getting even closer, he sees an extra sleeping while waiting for the others. The sleeper is awakened by someone knocking on the window. Groggy, he asks if they're done already. The person knocking on the window is Jihan. The guy quickly grabs his phone, wondering how Jian found them so fast. Jihan meanwhile punches the window and breaks it to snatch the phone. Holding the phone invisibly annoyed, Jian asks if the guy didn't hear him knocking on the door. He then asks the extra what he's waiting for and tells him to get out, to which the guy nervously asks if Jihan is a hero, claiming he can explain everything. Jihan warns him that they'll talk only after he gets out of the car. Jihan lifts the guy up into the air, telling him that he's the hero who found the crime scene, so determining whether the guy lives or dies is his last chance. He demands the guy explain what's happening, but the guy, overwhelmed, merely mumbles. The scene shifts to inside a warehouse. Some people are hooded and tied up. They hear footsteps approaching and become frightened. A man in a suit arrives carrying a bag. He places it in front of someone who becomes delighted upon seeing it. A bald man with a cracked head asks if that's the gift he got today, and another guy responds affirmatively, saying it's the half-human cat girl the client requested. They remove the tape from her mouth. She begins screaming, pleading for them not to kill her, while one of them laughs, saying she has spirit. She quickly starts offering money, saying she can give them all her money, begging to be let go. He asks how much she's talking about. She responds that it's around 2 million won, and he replies that it's far too little. Then she responds that it's all she has after working for weeks, and the bald man says she worked hard to earn that money. Looking at the girl, the bald man says he hates to repeat himself, but it's very little for him. He adds that compared to the 900 million won he will earn by selling her, he reveals that her buyers have some experiments planned for her and therefore she shouldn't be upset since she'll receive special treatment. He continues saying it must be better than being sent to the slaughterhouse, don't you think? Then once again all the deceased individuals are shown after the entire conversation between the bald man and the feline human hybrid girl. The bodies of the people at the location are shown in detail. The bald man informs his assistant that the client will arrive in 40 minutes and orders him to clean up the mess immediately. The assistant responds affirmatively and begins to move, but the girl interrupts and asks a pointed question. She questions whether he realizes that everything happening there is completely illegal and cannot continue. The bald man, showing no remorse, responds with a question that directly targets her. He asks what people would think if they saw her in such a humiliating and vulnerable situation. Then he asserts that after everything humanity has endured, what they truly want is revenge. He unapologetically calls her a monster as she begins to emit a powerful and radiant aura around her body. She quickly considers activating her berserk mode to escape, but notices something strange and unusual. Her body doesn't respond as it should, and she wonders if someone is directly interfering with her mana. At that moment the bald man's assistant appears behind her and without hesitation slams her head into the ground. He declares that mana doesn't work against him, making it clear that she is utterly powerless before him. Confused about what's happening, the girl asks what he's doing and he calmly responds. He explains that he's draining her mana so she has no chance to fight back. The bald man, watching the scene, instructs his assistant to be careful not to damage the merchandise before delivery. He comments that feline hybrids are always troublesome and must be controlled to prevent further complications. The bald man asserts that she must have understood the message by now and orders her to be taken to the waiting room immediately. He adds that if she continues her defiance she will be subdued by force. Without hesitation the assistant promptly complies, but at that moment everyone in the room hears a noise coming from the roof. The bald man, intrigued, questions what's happening and the assistant explains that he Had guards prepared. He reveals that the guards were on alert to act quickly if anything unusual occurred at the location. The source of the noise is revealed to be the protagonist, who descends from the roof while dust spreads around the bald man and the assistant look at him in confusion, unable to comprehend what's happening. Jihan appears at this moment and begins a serious conversation with them, stating that human trafficking is illegal. The assistant recognizes Jihan and informs the bald man that he's the same guy who tried to stop them earlier. Surprised, the bald man asks why no one had informed him of something so important until that moment. The assistant explains that he assumed the guards had taken care of Jihan and that nothing else would be necessary. At this point Jihan remains silent but begins to wonder if these two are the true culprits. He reflects that the situation is far more severe than he imagined when he was observing from the roof. Determined, Jihan announces that he initially planned to let the police handle the case but has completely changed his mind. He declares that he will personally resolve everything, stating that the two of them are nothing but monsters to be destroyed. The bald man, trembling with fear, begs for mercy and attempts to justify his actions by claiming he was just following orders. Jihan is unmoved and demands to know whose orders he was following, insisting on immediate answers. Lowering his head, the bald man promises to provide all the necessary names if his life is spared. At that moment he is shown smiling maniacally and psychopathically while still keeping his head down. Then the bald man shouts for his guards to kill Jihan, ordering an attack without hesitation. Jihan wastes no time and activates his sampling ability, disappearing instantly from everyone's sight. The guards begin to wonder where Jihan is, looking around but unable to locate him. Suddenly Jihan reappears above them, declaring that he's right above, watching everything carefully. The guards exchange nervous glances as Jihan comments that they aren't amateurs when it comes to concealing their presence. He questions whether these guards might be heroes as they exhibit highly refined skills. Without further delay Jihan launches into action, delivering quick and precise strikes against his opponents. One of the henchmen tries to surprise him by sneaking up from behind, but Jihan dodges skillfully and immediately counterattacks. The bald man watches in disbelief, murmuring that it's impossible for someone of rank 5 to have so much power. Jihan declares that they shouldn't expect everything to go according to their plans and attacks with greater intensity. Soon the bodies of the boss's henchmen and the assistant are shown lying on the ground, completely defeated. Jihan approaches the girl and removes the tape covering her mouth, allowing her to speak again. Still confused, she asks who he is and Jihan responds that he's there to help her and get her out of that situation. With everything seemingly resolved, Jihan informs her that the police are on their way and asks her a direct question. He asks if she remembers everything that happened because he'll need to report the information to the authorities. The half-human cat girl confirms that she remembers, but as she turns her head she sees the bodies scattered on the ground. Jihan apologizes, explaining that there was nothing he could do for the other children at the location. The cat girl starts crying, wondering why she has to be treated like this, as if she were a monster. She wishes she had never been born with that body and doesn't understand why people insist on hating her so much. Jihan silently observes the scene, wishing he could say something to comfort her, but the words don't come. The police arrive at the scene and confirm that a hero from the Epic Guild neutralized all the kidnappers present. At that moment the cat girl's face is shown, reflecting all the despair she felt in that situation. Then the scene changes completely, revealing an old Japanese-style house with a very traditional atmosphere. There the manager of the Yup appeared, talking to a mysterious young man and thanking him for the meeting earlier that day. The young man replies that he's open to meeting again, and the manager thanks him once more for the information he provided. The manager states that the information was extremely useful, commenting that they almost manipulated the rising human. The mysterious young man confirms, saying he has been keeping up with the news and is monitoring recent movements closely. He warns that the association is watching the manager and asks if his organization can operate without issues. The manager responds that there's no need to worry, assuring him that everything is under control and working as expected. The young man cautions that he doesn't want complications, emphasizing that too much news is already surfacing in a single day. Intrigued, the manager asks what he means, and the young man mentions a possible plague lurking in the area. He explains that they wanted some materials from the warehouse, but the police ended up Investigating and compromising their plans, he mentions that he doesn't know if it was a coincidence, but the hero who defeated the cyber cat was at the warehouse. The manager seems surprised but tries to assure the young man, promising to resolve everything quickly and discreetly. The mysterious young man stresses that he expects an efficient solution without delays and then bids farewell. After the conversation, the kidnapper's hideout is shown again. Police officers are at the scene conducting the investigation, and one of them comments that they found 12 children alive. Unfortunately, the rest of the victims weren't as lucky and didn't survive. Jihan was talking to 2 police officers when he heard someone calling his name. Turning around, he recognized Seu, who asked what was going on and whether the children had been saved. Jihan explained that he managed to save half of them, but the other half was already dead. Seu, with a worried expression, asked about the culprits. He replied that he hadn't killed any of them, explaining that the police were conducting a full investigation into the case. In his thoughts, he reflected on Shu's frightened look, which he understood well since she was of a different species. Jihan commented that there was probably more happening behind the scenes, as leaving the culprits alive was the only way to track the others involved. He mentioned that the criminals talked about a hipster client who was supposed to come to the location but wouldn't show up while the police were there. He then asked the police to investigate this, and one of them assured him that everything was under control, allowing Jihan to go home. Jihan asked if there was a problem, and the officer replied that one of the victims wanted to talk to him. As he tried to figure out who it was, the officer brought the half-human cat girl to him. She apologized for interrupting and asked the question. Seu reassured the girl, saying there was no problem and everything was fine. Jihan realized the girl preferred for him to take her home instead of going with the police. She explained that she lived at a place called Blue Sky at the top, a home for vulnerable children of other species. It was an orphanage for children at risk, considered the best in the country, but he was surprised to see that some were still being kidnapped. Meanwhile, he looked ahead and saw a girl who caught his attention. She asked who he was and then started running towards someone standing further ahead. Zhang, the kidnapped girl, ran and embraced the person, while the other hybrid girls said she hadn't noticed their presence. After glancing at Jihan and Seu, she remarked that she didn't realize they were there. Jihan replied that it was no problem and told her to carry on. The girl then introduced herself as Jan, the director of Blue Sky. She explained that the police had contacted her earlier asking if the 2 of them were Jihan and Seu. After bowing, she sincerely thanked them for saving Riggs. Seu said it was nothing and that she was just doing her duty as a hero. Zhang asked if they weren't too busy and invited them to come inside for a cup of tea. She assured them it wouldn't take much of their time. The 3 entered the facility and Jihan commented that the place was surprisingly peaceful for an orphanage. Zhang explained that at that hour all the children were already asleep. However, 3 children came running shouting that Riggs had finally returned. One of them ran to hug her, while the director scolded them, telling the children to go to bed. One asked if Riggs was hurt and another, relieved, said they were glad she was back safe and sound. Jihan commented that it seemed the children didn't get enough rest. The director apologized for them. Riggs then offered to take the children back to bed, asking the others to go ahead without her. Jihan noted that she was very strong even after everything that had happened. Soon the 3 of them were seated waiting for Riggs to return. The director apologized again, explaining that children these days were very energetic. Jihan replied that it was refreshing to see children just being themselves without any restrictions. Zhang, looking downcast, admitted that she had carelessly mentioned Riggs' kidnapping to the police. She commented that because of this all the children had stayed up waiting for explanations. Sia seized the opportunity to ask if there had been another victim besides Riggs at the orphanage. The director, with a relieved smile, replied that Riggs was the only one involved in the incident. She lamented that other victims in other facilities had also been affected. Hearing this, Seu became visibly shaken and asked if there had been similar cases in the past. At that moment someone entered, apologizing for interrupting the conversation. Who turned to see who it was. A red-haired woman entered and brought 3 cups of tea for the group. The director thanked Lila for staying up late to help. Lila replied that it wasn't a problem since it was her responsibility. She quickly glanced at Seu and asked the director if these were the people she mentioned earlier. The director confirmed and Lila bowed, thanking the 2 heroes for saving Riggs. The director then commented that Lila had also gone through something similar for years ago. 2 children faced the same situation but only Lila survived. Hearing this, Jihan apologized for overhearing the conversation. Sia asked if there was anything they could do to help. She offered to make a donation on behalf of the guild if the Director would accept. The director thanked her but declined. She explained that many people had offered help in the past. She looked at them and said that many had made promises but didn't follow through when they needed help. The financial group that had offered it didn't deliver. She explained that only one guild truly helped them when they needed it most, and that guild was Dice, the guild led by the hero Doha. Without their help she would never have found Leah. In his thoughts, Jihan reflected that this happened for years ago when Doha was known for causing trouble everywhere. The director continued, saying that during that time many supporters reacted differently. Many beings of other races harbored resentment toward the heroes. Jihan commented that it all seemed like a dilemma. Even when people help others, everyone ends up gaining something in the process. The director said she would very much like to accept their help, but she feared what might happen in the future. Sia listened and tucked her hair behind her ears. She said that if that was her only concern she didn't need to worry anymore. The director asked what she meant by that. It was then that C who revealed she was also a hybrid. The two exchanged surprised looks, especially Ilala, who asked if CA was a half-elf. The director remarked that she thought CA was the guild master back then. Sia confirmed that the guild was founded by a half-elf, but she said there was nothing special about that. She shared that over time she faced much discrimination for being a half-elf. There was a moment when she had to step away from everything to avoid being a guardian. She then looked at Jihan and said that there are people who choose to understand you instead of simply criticizing you. They believe there are people you can genuinely trust. C who told the director that she was one of those people. The director happy said that maybe something could be done with that. At that moment she thought that perhaps these two could really make a difference. The director felt a gentle breeze pass before her eyes as she watched the two of them. The wind moved toward the door, bringing new hope to someone in need. At that moment we see the half-human cat girl named Rexes. The scene changes again now to a point of light. C who apologized to Jihan, but he replied that it wasn't a problem. He said she probably understood that the donations would greatly affect the guild. She confirmed she understood and asked him not to remind her of that again. Jihan complimented Siu, saying she truly acted like a guild master. The scene shifts to the guild headquarters. Siu, arms crossed and with an angry expression, asks, "Are you serious about bringing Yuri men into the guild?" Jihan calmly responds, "Now that we know the guild is at level 4 it's time to recruit new members, but it's not fully confirmed yet. Yuri Min is still considering it." C who, relieved, realizes they weren't in disagreement, but were simply discussing the possibility of Yu Min joining the guild. She asks, "Do you really think you can recruit her?" Jihan confidently replies, "We won't know until we really try." C who, clearly surprised, deeply ponders the unexpected opportunity that has arisen, carefully weighing the possibilities and implications. "It's not every day that we get a chance to recruit someone like Yuri into our guild," she says thoughtfully. She then gives Jihan a piece of advice, stating that this time she'll let his move slide, but next time she wants to be informed in advance. Jihan, lowering his head, replies, "Understood, I'll remember that next time." Seu now Khmer says the discussion is over for today and that she wants to know how they'll use Rx's gift. Jihan, still holding the crystal, asks, "You're talking about the mana crystal?" C who confirms yes, that crystal. From what Rexy said, it's from Carol. Jihan, examining the crystal, observes this crystal is much denser than the mana crystals we found around here. He continues thoughtfully, "We could simply give it to Sil, but I want to learn more from this." C who, curious, asks, "What kind of opportunity do you mean?" J with a calm smile replies, "It will come soon." He then begins summoning Sil and in a more serious tone asks, "Where are you going? Why did you suddenly hide?" Holding Sil in his hands he says, "We're in an office, there's no need to hide." Sil, visibly irritated, lets out a high-pitched sound that reverberates through the room, making her displeasure clear. Jihan, visibly impatient, asks her to calm down, saying her behavior is giving him a headache. C who, watching the scene, wonders since when Jihan could talk to Sil that way. She begins to recall her mother, who had the same kind of intimacy with Sil. Jihan points to the mana crystal and says, "You like mana crystals, don't you? Take a look at this." Sil rushes toward the mana crystal, ready to devour it. However, Jihan puts his hand in front and stops her firmly, saying, "Not so fast." He continues, frustrated, "You did the exact same thing last time. I was really embarrassed when you pulled that move." Holding Sil in his hands he adds, "If you keep this up you won't get the mana crystal." Sil makes a small noise as if apologizing. Jihan then starts giving orders. His first order is for S to form 3 polygons, which he does without hesitation. He then gives the second order, "Now spin clockwise," and without hesitation he continues, giving precise and detailed instructions, maintaining full control of the situation. C who, observing all this, comments, "You don't seem like a teacher, you're more like a sergeant." She Begins to recall her mother, thinking that when Sil was under her mother's contract it was always a mutual agreement with a close friendship. Reflecting with slight discomfort, she thinks Jihan is treating S as if she's a pet dog, but in the end she concludes it's her problem since she's the one who chose him as her master. Jihan then, seeing that Sil has followed his orders, offers the mana crystal as a reward. Sil, excited, rushes toward the crystal. Jihan, smiling, says, "Calm down, there's no need to hurry." At that moment an explosion occurs, releasing a bright flash. Jihan, feeling the intensity of the situation, begins to think that something is different this time as Sil is absorbing much more mana than usual. He remembers Doha's words, who told him to gather as much mana crystal as possible as she might be able to materialize her body. Suddenly a mana crystal ball cracks and Jihan realizes that Sil is beginning to materialize her body just as Doha had mentioned. Another explosion occurs, releasing another burst of light. Jihan, now more alert, closes his eyes. When he opens them he notices he is no longer in the same place as before. He wonders where he is. A voice begins speaking to him, saying he is in the virtual space she created. Jihan, surprised, turns around and hears the voice say they can finally talk. Startled, Jihan asks how she can speak. The voice explains that thanks to the mana crystal he offered they can now temporarily converse in this space she created. However, she warns that she won't be able to maintain it for long and that she'll be brief. Jihan wonders why he was brought there to talk to her, especially since the place is so full of mana. The voice reveals that they are being pursued and that just as she restored her strength with the mana crystal the people chasing them are doing the same. She warns Jihan to be wary of the people around him, especially those he trusts the most, as they are the ones with the most to hide. Jihan asks if there is someone he trusts who might be a traitor. The voice responds that she isn't certain but that he will find out for himself. She then tells him to protect Se who at all costs, as it is Ear's will and the only reason he was chosen as a successor. Jihan, confused, asks for a clear explanation but the voice insists he will understand in time. The nearly destroyed crystal ball warns that at the right moment and time they will meet again. When Jian returns to where he was, he is in shock. Clearly shaken by what he just experienced, he cries while holding Sei's arm, who asks if he's okay and if he thought he'd never wake up again. Jihan, still dazed, replies that he just met Sil. Seu, still confused, asks what he means by that. At that moment an energy begins to glow again and the two of them look, realizing that something has changed. The aura and the radiance emitted are different and both start to think that Sil is now something entirely different. The scene then shifts to the PC in Korea, where three people are present. One of them is tinkering with equipment while a test rat is shown. The two men who are fighting Jihan in the alley are identified as 015 and 013, suggesting something bigger is unfolding as a vial of liquid is poured onto the test rat. The researcher comments that the last kidnapping didn't go as planned. Because of that they lost their main base and the trust of their business partners. He wonders who should be held accountable for everything that went wrong. The rat begins to transform and 015 speaks, making it clear that his task was only to escort. They avoided dealing with the hero properly out of fear of exposing themselves. At this point the researcher, visibly frustrated, asks if they are seriously concerned about that. He then questions whether these are really their excuses for failing against the hero. With a stern look the researcher says the real reason they were created was not for this. He warns that he won't repeat himself. The tension rises around 015 and the researcher, looking distressed, orders them to bring the hunter from the old days. Immediately the two respond with a yes sir and prepared to carry out the order. Suddenly someone enters the room announcing that there's a problem underway. The researcher, concerned, asks what happened and the person reports that heroes have invaded the location. She informs him that the Dice Guild has shown up and started arresting everyone in the office. 015, who had remained silent until then, states that this is a direct order from the association. He orders everyone to be gathered. Immediately a person is shown knocking on a door, then Bang appears and asks if Doha called him. Doha says he heard everything that happened in the rank 4 Ma area and acknowledges that his platoon managed to save the day. Bang then comments that by the time he arrived the mutants were almost defeated. In response Doha says there's no need for him to be modest. With that Doha states that he has another task for him and Bang asks if it's another Emmy. Doha replies that it's not and explains that he needs him to arrest the Yupk manager known as Mlim along with all his employees. Bang cautious questions whether the Department of Hero Association authorized this arrest and warns that without authorization it would only bring more problems for the Dice Guild. Doha, determined, insists that they need to take the risk as they'll never be able to capture them otherwise. He also reveals that the most important thing Is that there's a mole within the association? Bang confused asks if there's a traitor collaborating with the Yupk. Doha confirms and links this to the recent rise in cases where heroes get involved in dark accidents. He emphasizes that he sees no benefit in pacts with other guilds. He warns Bang to be cautious as he has a bad feeling about all of this. Now the scene shifts back to Bang inside the headquarters. Some detained individuals plead to be released, claiming they've done nothing wrong. Bang, deep in thought, reflects on what Doha reported about the criminal activities. He notices that no one there seems to pose a threat. Then Kim Hanso arrives saying he's checked everyone and confirms they're just regular civilians. Bang asks if they found Mlim. At that moment one of the extras starts speaking, saying everyone will die if the person finds out. Bang approaches the nearly lifeless man and asks what he means. The extra responds that everyone there will die when those people arrive. Bang demands to know who they are and insists they stop stalling. Finally the extra responds that when the blessed ones arrive everyone will realize how blind and arrogant they are. Bang wonders who these blessed ones are and if they're connected to Miss Lim. Kim Hansu dismisses the man as a fanatic spouting nonsense and suggests they stop and leave. Meanwhile, two other group members sense a strange mana in the area similar to that of a monster. At that moment 013 and 015 appear. They declare their intention to kill the heroes present. 015 remarks that this is perfect since he was looking for someone to vent his fury on. The three members of Bang's group noticed something unusual about the enemy's mana. Kim Hanso asked for an explanation and the hooded member warns everyone to be cautious with his hand in his pocket. Bang asks 015 if he knows where Miss Lim is. 015 confirms and returns the question, asking why they're looking for him. Immediately 015 charges at the group, claiming they'll become empty shells. It away as he launches an attack. At that moment monstrous larvae begin emerging around 015. The woman in the group draws her sword and activates the blue dragon Y/sword art ability. Suddenly a scream echoes in the background. She realizes something is wrong. At that moment the larvae start attacking other people associated with the manager. She questions why the larvae are attacking their own group's allies and reflects on how strange 013 and 015 seem. 013 appears delivering a punch to her head, claiming he'll save her and asking her to wait. She turns, complaining that she let herself get distracted. Meanwhile 013 launches a powerful attack, sending energy scattering throughout the area. 013 carelessly remarks that the hero managed to block the attack, taking advantage of the moment. The hooded member warns it's now his chance. At that moment Kim Hansu appears above and lands a flying kick on 013's head. The blow hits squarely, slamming 0133 to the ground with his head buried. The three members stand still watching 013 lying on the ground. 05 questions whether they really managed to defeat him and acknowledges the strength of the Dice Guild's rank 3 squad. Even so, he comments that it doesn't matter since MLM managed to escape. Suddenly Bang appears beside him holding his staff and running even faster. He asks if 05 really thinks he can afford to be distracted. Bang launches an attack but 05 narrowly dodges it. However 05 begins to question how Bang can be so fast. At that moment 015 is shown on the ground missing part of his body. He mutters that the report was wrong and admits Bang is very strong. Bang replies that it was a beginner's mistake to let his guard down near an enemy even for a second. It's over. He turns and asks if the others managed to capture 013. He then states that it's fine for today and asks that the injured and the two be taken to the Dice Guild. With a loud laugh 05 taunt Bang, saying he always talked about staying on guard but now seems to be ignoring his own advice. Bang tries to understand how 015 is still conscious, while 013 begins to get up impatient. 015 asks how much longer 013 plans to stay on the ground and orders him to take something. After that he remarks that everyone there is lucky because they will have the privilege of witnessing the second blessing. Meanwhile the scene shifts to the DI skill building where SEU and Jihan are observing the location. SEU comments on how quickly the renovations were completed. Jihan guesses that it's because the guild master is an earth elementalist. At that moment the DI guild assistant appears, greeting the two and noting how long has been since she last saw them. Taking the opportunity she asks the reason for their visit. See who explains that they came to see Doha. After hearing this the assistant apologizes and informs them that he is not available at the moment. Jihan takes the chance to mention that the matter involves Sil and asks her to inform Doha about their visit before she can respond. A shout draws their attention. A man approaches reporting that they lost contact with Bang squad and highlighting that their last location was at the Yup headquarters. Surprised by this information, she scolded him, saying that matters like these should be discussed inside the guild headquarters where other guilds cannot overhear. Pensive, she wonders why something so important is happening during Doha's absence. When called again, Jihan seizes the opportunity to ask for an explanation about the relationship between Dice and the Yup. After the conversation between Jihan Sayu and Doha's assistant, the scene shifts to a helicopter flying toward the building to land. The three inside discuss their next steps. Jihan breaks the silence by asking if they invaded the APC. With a serious tone, the assistant reveals that what she's about to say is highly confidential. She explains that weeks ago the Hero Association ordered all guilds to unite in a joint investigation against the IPC. She mentions Mlim as the central figure suspected in the operation. Additionally, she details that the plan was discussed among South Korea's 6 largest guilds and was scheduled to begin in the coming days. See who questions why the Dice Guild decided to act alone if the operation was supposed to be a joint effort. In response, the assistant clarifies that Doha does not trust the other guilds and believes that such operations usually lead to unnecessary conflicts. For this reason, the Dice Guild decided to act on its own and started the investigation before the official plan. However, she admits that Bang Squad was sent to invade the building but lost contact with them at this point. Sia emphasizes that they cannot send another squad without exposing the guild. Lowering her head, the assistant agrees and confesses that they have no alternatives. At that moment, Jihan interrupts the conversation and says they can leave it to him. He then asserts that they can entrust the operation to them as his guild is enlarged and no one will suspect them. Since there are only 2 of them, it will be easier to infiltrate the Yup base. As he opens the helicopter door, he pauses and see who does the same. Deep in thought, Jihan considers that this is the perfect moment to test Sil's new abilities. He calls Sayu and asks her to use her levitation ability again. So confused, asks if he wants her to jump from a high place again, but Jihan replies that there's no time to think about it and jumps. Asked for a moment to cast the spell. The scene shifts to inside the Yup headquarters where someone is lying on the floor with ketchup spread everywhere. Bang is leaning against the wall and starts spitting ketchup. Wondering what happened and if he passed out. While looking around, he questions whether everyone is okay until he sees something terrible. Bang's squad was completely decimated after the fight was 05013. Only their bodies remain. Realizing this, Bang stands up and begins reflecting on how everything happened. Then he feels immense pain and notices arm is cut. Screaming in pain, he laments, saying it's all his fault. At that moment, 015 appears and asks if Bang plans to just sit there, taunting him and reminding him that he was the one who said not to get distracted during a fight. 05 emerges with a new appearance and declares that he's been waiting for Bang, stating that he won't let the mana crystal go to waste. He then looks to the side and asks if the other person is thinking the same thing. 013 appears now with a monstrous form and says weak hero. Bang realizes that the bodies were turned into monsters and concludes that the Yup is conducting such experiments. He decides he must inform Doha at all costs. While lost in his thoughts, Kim Hanso starts sighing. Bang asks if he's listening, but Kim Hanso only apologizes, saying he should have protected everyone as the squad's tank. Bang, observing Kim Hansa's eyes, says it's okay since he's in no condition to move or speak. Bang mentions that the guild was sending reinforcements, but Kim Hanso says it doesn't matter and insists Bang needs to leave quickly, as he himself won't be able to escape. He pleads with Bang to inform the guild about what happened there. At that moment, Bang tells him to stop talking, warning that if he continues he'll just end up coughing up more ketchup, while Kim Hansu insists that Bang must survive. The gorilla known as 013 delivers a powerful punch. As a result, the ketchup splatters everywhere and Bang watches the horrifying scene. The gorilla begins calling for the heroes and Bang stands up in anger, calling them bastards and vowing to take them both down. However, as he speaks, 03's hand comes toward him. Bang takes a direct hit and is slammed into the wall with such force that he hears the sound of his bones breaking. 05 and 013 remain standing. 05 comments on how tragic the situation is and tells 013 not to kill Bang as he wants to bring him to the manager. At that moment, a voice declares from the background that no one will leave. It's Jihan and Seu who have arrived. Bang wonders what Jihan is doing there. He tells them they need reinforcements and urgent medical care for his team. Jihan, taking in the scene, thinks There's no need to say anything more. 013 charges toward Jihan, commenting about taking his head to the manager. 05 warns him to stay back and be careful. Jihan tells C he'll handle this alone, and she asks if he's sure he can do it. As he conjures power in his hand, he asks her to stay behind so she won't get hurt if something goes wrong. He admits he's still not entirely sure he can control S. At that moment, S's physical form appears. Jihan begins striking at 013, drawing his sword. His eyes glow as he comments on feeling Sil's overwhelming mana. As 013 approaches, Jihan notices his blade has changed thanks to Sil's power. At that instant, Jihan delivers a powerful strike toward the gorilla, emitting an intense glow from his attack. The attack is called Aura Blade. At this point, the concept of mana manipulation is explained. This power is derived from nature and can only be obtained through a contract with an elemental spirit. The explanation continues, detailing that normal elemental magic also originates from nature. However, this type of magic is merely a limitation compared to true elemental manipulation. This manipulation comes from a genuine connection between the element and the contractor operating on a completely different level. It's explained that for Jihan this part was easy as he faced a bigger problem. He had almost no mana, unlike other heroes born with plenty, and therefore Jihan had none. Whenever he used magic, he put his life at risk. To cope, he developed a technique to consume minimal mana, making his fighting style resemble swordsmanship rather than powerful magic. But things changed. S evolved, allowing her elemental form to take a physical shape. With this, Jihan could draw additional mana directly from the elemental instead of using his own. It's explained that he surpassed his previous limits and became a true wind elementalist. In the next scene, 05 covers his face as dust fills the area. He can't comprehend how Jihan defeated 013 with a single blow, even in his powerful form. 013 lies on the ground, his body split, calling for the hero and saying he must be eliminated under the manager's orders. Jihan observes 013 and notices a purple glow emanating from his mana resembling the mutants. He deduces that their bodies are likely fused with mutant elements. Jihan then turns to 015 and recalls that he mentioned crossing paths before in the alley. During a small confrontation, he admits that back then he couldn't defeat 015 but warns that this time it will be different. Jihan summons Sil and grips his sword. Advancing toward 015, he declares that one way or another he will uncover everything about what 05 is and what he's planning. 015, frightened, realizes Jihan is too strong and fighting him would be suicide. He recalls missing limbs, orders to bring back Jihan's head, and knows returning empty-handed would have severe consequences. Looking back, 015 sees the fallen body and starts thinking of how he can use it. He sends his larvae toward the body, which quickly takes it over. 015, now holding Bang in his possession, asks Jihan if that person was important to him. C, who irritated, informs Jihan that Bang has been captured and is being used as a hostage. 015, with a grin on his face, threatens that any wrong move will result in Bang's neck being snapped. Jihan, holding his sword in a battle stance, says he cannot let that happen. He then lowers his sword and proposes that if Bang is released, he and C, who will retreat. 015, satisfied, inwardly celebrates, thinking it's easy to manipulate heroes. All it takes is putting one of them in danger and they fall into your hands. He also reflects that Mlim must already be aware of what's happening and that reinforcements will arrive in a few minutes. While 05 is lost in thought, Jihan suddenly appears right in front of him. Jihan declares he can't believe 015 fell for his trap and attacks the larva holding Bang. Furious, 015 calls Jihan a bastard, to which Jian responds that he didn't think 05 would be so naive. Jihan then begins to unleash direct attacks on 015, cut in half. 05 wonders how Jihan managed to do that, considering he was transitioning into his second phase. As he makes strange noises, Jihan approaches, places his sword in front of his head and demands answers. He asks what the Yup is planning, who Miss S. Lim is and where to find him. Sweating, 015 admits that he now understands why Lim considers Jihan a threat. He tries to persuade Jihan to abandon the Hunters Association and join the Yup, claiming that other heroes have already been blessed by missing Lim. He adds that as a wind elementalist, Jihan would become even stronger with this blessing. Jihan, however, cuts him off, saying he's not interested in such talk and demands to know the IC's true objective. 015 laughs loudly, calling Jihan naive, and reveals that the boss's plan has been in motion for a long time and that everyone will find out soon enough. At that moment, the scene shifts to see her tending to Bang's injured body. She tries to check if he can hear her. While he murmurs in pain, Bang asks if she's from Epic and what she's doing there. Se, who explains that she was sent by Doha's assistant to this location. Frustrated, Bang says all of this is embarrassing for him considering both were evaluated by him. C warns him not to move or talk too much, saying she only managed to stop the bleeding temporarily. Still, he tries to ask if they managed to defeat one of them. Sayo tells Bang not to worry as Jihan was able to handle one of them. Hearing this, Bang asks what she means by that. He begins to feel a massive amount of mana coming from one of the bodies and warns that this means one of them is still alive. He reflects on the situation but realizes this mana is unfamiliar and far stronger than any other present. At that moment, someone appears behind Jihan. Reacting quickly, Jihan launches an attack but immediately wonders if there are more adversaries around. His sword is blocked by a dagger. A woman remarks that he shouldn't raise his weapon against a lady, calling it rude. Jihan, confused, tries to figure out who she is. The woman comments that she likes his style, saying he's just her type. Jihan becomes even more perplexed, realizing that she blocked his Aurak sword as if it were nothing. He steps back, analyzing the situation and concluding she cannot be a random individual. The woman approaches, praising him again and calling him cute. She then asks if he would like to be her boyfriend, promising to take very good care of him. Jihan, surprised, replies, "No thank you." Still deep in thought, he wonders if this person is another Yupk experiment. The woman, disappointed, says it's a shame because she really wanted him. She then notices 015 on the ground and comments that he'll catch a cold if he stays there. Desperate, 015 begs for another chance, claiming he just needs another mana crystal. The woman, standing imposingly, analyzes 05 and states that he has already reached his limit, probably using 2 mana crystals. She explains that test subjects like him cannot handle more than 2 crystals. 05 continues to plead, saying that with another crystal he could take on Jihan. Losing patience, the woman strikes 0115's body, stating she doesn't like repeating herself. Jihan watches the scene in shock. She asserts that those who can't win a simple fight don't deserve a second chance. The woman continues attacking 015 and finally turns to Jihan. She says she's curious to see if he can handle the situation and warns him that he only has one chance. Ends by challenging him, saying she wants to see if he'll mess everything up. After the dialogue with Jihan, the woman slowly gets up after delivering several blows to 015. Jihan then questions if they're not on the same side and asks why she would act that way. In response, she sarcastically asks if he feels sorry for 015, stating that such compassion is useless and worthless. Continuing, the woman declares that people like him are dead weight that should be eliminated quickly to avoid slowing others down. With a smile on her face, she points her dagger at Jihan, saying that's enough talk. She charges at him, stating she can't stand people who don't know when to shut up. Jihan watches the dagger approach his neck and calls for Sil, who blocks the attack. Surprised, the woman comments that Jihan is full of tricks and that his companion is quite peculiar. However, as she speaks, she's interrupted by a counterattack from Jihan, who sends her flying with a powerful blow. Jihan throws her against the wall. He stands still, waiting for another attack. No KN that strike wouldn't be enough. Alerting Sil, Jihan mentions that the woman is still on her feet, thinking he has gained some time. Jihan considers returning to see her to check on her. However, in the background, the woman rises and asks where he thinks he's going. The masochist says it's been a while since she found someone like Jihan and mentions that Jirei is very interested in him. Reflecting, Jihan realizes the blow landed but wasn't effective enough and that he'll need to face her directly. The woman, advancing, declares that Jirei isn't done playing with him yet. Holding his sword, Jihan asks her to imbue his blade once again. As she delivers an overhead attack, she taunts Jihan, asking what his next move will be. He responds with a quick strike aimed at cutting her in half, but notices something's wrong when he realizes it's just an after image of her searching for her. Jihan senses her behind him. With a dagger in hand, he barely blocks the attack, acknowledging that without his abilities he would be in serious trouble. In his mind, he compares her style to that of an assassin. Determined, Jihan decides she won't be able to avoid his next strike. At that moment, a window appears indicating an 85% chance of success, but another afterimage of her appears, allowing her to escape downward. He realizes she dodged again. While reflecting, Jihan notices her movements are all over the place. The woman comments that she barely escaped and says if she'd been a second slower she would have been defeated like the other two. She acknowledges that Jihan eliminated 013 and 015 while he ponders that if he doesn't take her down now she'll become a future problem. With multiple options in mind, Jihan decides to use a decisive attack. Believing it's his only chance, the woman ready for the confrontation mentions she's never seen anyone use aura like that. Running toward Jihan, she claims that Joe will always be ready to face him whenever he is. Jihan, resolute, says he'll blow up the place too. See how the masochist escapes the next attack. He then unleashes a flurry of multiple strikes on her, but is interrupted by the manager, who arrives on the scene ordering the fight to stop immediately. Both turn in surprise, and the manager explains that he had asked the masochist only to assess the situation, not to initiate a confrontation. Adjusting his glasses, he introduces himself as Lim and greets Jihan, demonstrating that he knows his reputation in the Epic Guild. The masochist, holding her dagger, also acknowledges Lim. As Jihan wonders why the manager is there, the masochist argues that she could have resolved everything on her own and questions his presence. He sarcastically asks if that was her idea of handling things. She retorts saying it's impossible to resolve without causing damage. During this exchange, the manager begins observing the surroundings and inquires about the state of 013 and 015. The masochist confirms that both are dead and adds that 05 even had the audacity to request another mana crystal after being defeated. The manager responds with disdain, calling them both pathetic. He then orders Jerry to collect the mana crystals and informs her they'll be leaving soon. Jerry protests, saying she'd like to stay a little longer to fight, but Jihan interrupts, declaring that no one will leave so easily. He states that both are classic criminals and places them under arrest. Jihan informs them that reinforcements from the Hero Association are already on their way and demands that they remain silent and avoid causing trouble. The manager, however, laughs mockingly and comments that he was expecting those reinforcements, claiming it's all part of his plan. He then reveals a psychotic smile and laughs maliciously. At that moment, an intense aura of mana is released. Jihan falls to his knees, feeling the weight of the energy, and comments that this level of mana is far beyond what any human should possess. Observing Jay prostrate, the manager reveals that his plan involved luring the 6 major guilds in the region to that location. He mentions that everything was ruined by the Dice Guild, which decided to act on its own. Even so, he considers that the plan was not a complete failure. Jihan, confused, asks if the manager has always been infiltrated in the association and asserts that no member would approve of something so extreme. The manager confirms that the association doesn't entirely follow his orders. The masochist insinuates that Jihan is more naive than she thought, mentioning that the association has a traitor. These words leave Jihan perplexed as he tries to process everything. The scene shifts to a building showing the office of the association's president. In the office, Jun Yong, the general president, slams a paper on the desk with force, stating that the time has come. He leaves the room, locking the door behind him. At that moment, a voice echoes in the room, asking why the rush. The figure approaching is Doha, who gives the president a stern look and questions how the traitor is doing. Visibly nervous, the president tries to mask his fear, asking what Doha means by that. Before he can react, a block of earth emerges out of nowhere, striking his head, followed by another precise attack. Writhing in pain, the president screams, demanding to know why Doha is attacking him. Doha, in turn, begins to voice his suspicions. He states that if anyone could manipulate the 6 major guilds in Korea and leak information about heroes to the Yup, it could only be the president. Cornered, the president tries to argue that it's all a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, he struggles to free himself from the weight of the block, pinning him down, asking how long Doha has known about all this. Doha doesn't hesitate and coldly responds that he never trusted him. He continues, saying that someone so deceitful acting as a leader of an association always aroused his suspicion. Without wasting time, the president activates his power, unleashing demonic wings. Mocking Doha, he asks if he really believes he climbed to the top simply by flattering heroes. Displaying his transformation, he declares that this technology is the result of the IC's advancement, something far beyond Doha's comprehension. Meanwhile, Doha reflects that this transformation was made possible thanks to the mana crystals extracted from mutants. The president, confident, claims that the era of heroes is over, and that they are nothing but outdated relics ready to be eliminated. Doha, maintaining his composure, raises an earth wall for defense, but the president easily breaks through, mocking the attempt. The president advances, belittling Doha as a Class 1 hero, while Doha observes the opponent's destructive power and all. Doha dodges a precise blow and in swift move grabs the president's arm, asserting that he doesn't underestimate close combat. With surprising strength, Doha dislocates the president's arm. The President screams in exaggerated pain, but Doha realizes it's all an act. The president then activates a devastating ability, Dark Pulse, unleashing a terrifying scream. Doha feels the intensity of the power, comparing the ability to the demonic wings, and realizes that the president has become something beyond human. The impact of the attack destroys part of the environment, heightening the tension as the battle escalates. As the scene shows the devastating Hulk created by the battle, the association. President raises his hand in celebration. He mocks Doha, questioning if he's truly as powerful as people claim, and taunts how the situation has turned in his favor. Arrogantly, he provokes Doha, mentioning that his guild members were wiped out like insects due to his weak leadership. He also insinuates that Bang is in trouble, intensifying his taunts. However, as he gloats, a firm voice interrupts him. Doha emerges in scathe, stating with disdain that he hates dealing with demonic wings. Confused, the president asks how Doha could be unharmed, to which Doha explains that heroes are always ready to risk their lives. He adds that underestimating Bang was a mistake, in that although the president's trick is interesting for an aspiring monster, it's not enough. Doha then summons Mumu, and the president, perplexed, feels the ground trembling violently. The entire building begins to collapse, and he, overtaken by panic, screams about something underground engulfing everything. Doha taunts him, reminding him of his earlier words about elementalists being outdated. He states that this attack utilizes mana to trap the enemy and wishes him luck escaping. Despite the situation, the president began laughing uncontrollably. Doha, irritated, asked what he found so amusing. The president revealed that under the pretext of a joint investigation involving the Yepk, tons of heroes had been strategically sent far from the city. He then declared that the real plan was just beginning. The scene shifted to a peaceful street where people walked calmly. A child caught his mother's attention by pointing to the sky. Before she could understand what was happening, she felt something sinister, and suddenly a monster appeared. Chaos broke out as people began screaming for help. The mother desperately shielded her child. In the midst of the turmoil, a heroine named Miss appeared. She assured the woman and the boy that they were safe, promising that nothing bad would happen. Monsters began appearing in other parts of the city, spreading terror. A giant spider chased civilians, but a hero wielding a colossal hammer emerged with a devastating blow called Colossus Impact. He crushed the creature amid the chaos. Kong Jin appeared, bored av, waiting idly, seeing the situation as the perfect opportunity to act. He watched the battle intensify as more monsters emerged and heroes fought to protect the city. Among them was red-haired Guts, who delivered a powerful attack against one of the monsters while fighting the enemy. Guts wondered where so many monsters were coming from. Reflecting, he concluded that it was likely all planned by the Yupk, taking advantage of the hero's absence from the city. However, when surprised by a monster, he made it clear that it didn't matter who was behind it. To him, the most important thing was that this was his chance to become a Class 1 hero, and he was willing to do whatever it took. From atop of building, the association's president observed the number of heroes who had appeared and was intrigued by how quickly they mobilized. At that moment, Doha explained that he himself had summoned the heroes who were outside the city. Surprised, the president asked how that was possible. Doha, maintaining his composure, replied that he had also dealt with the members at the Yupk base. Meanwhile, a figure appeared loitering over the building. Doha revealed that he had sent the person he trusted most to handle the situation. The individual, Baek Chong, appeared before the building, admiring the sight and commenting that it was very fancy. Reluctantly, Doha admitted that Baek Chong was stronger than him. Baek Chong's presence didn't go unnoticed by the manager and the masochist, who watched attentively with his hands in his pockets. Baek Chong casually asked if everyone was enjoying the party and warned that he might disrupt things a bit. At that moment, everyone was taken aback by the arrival of an unexpected hero, turning their attention to him. Standing before the manager and the masochist was Baek Chong, leader of Red Hall, Korea's most powerful guild and known as the strongest hero in the country. Baek's mere presence created tension in the atmosphere and among everyone present. Facing the manager, he asked if it was Lim standing there. Lim in turn questioned why someone like Baek was there, while the masochist commented on his looks, calling him handsome. The manager then warned Baek about the monster invasion across Korea, emphasizing the importance of a hero like him being on the front lines. However, Baek responded that there was no need to worry, as he had been asked to stop, by assuring them that other heroes were handling the monsters he had left behind. His gaze shifted to Jihan, mentioning that there was an unexpected visitor at the scene. Baek remarked that Doha had spoken a lot about Jihan, tilting his head and asking what brought him there, questioning if he was allied with Mlim. Jihan quickly denied it, while noting that Baek's mana was even more intense than the sewings. Reflecting on the Failure of the Dice Guild heroes. Jihan concluded that the situation was not in his favor. Beck, on the other hand, stated that he expected something different but ultimately said it didn't matter. He began casting an ability called revealing his plan to take everyone there with him. As soon as he unleashed his magic, the manager murmured, admitting he had never witnessed Beck's true power, only heard reports. In his thoughts he realized that Beck genuinely intended to eliminate everyone. Desperate, the manager told Jerry to forget about the mana crystals and escape immediately. Beck, holding a staff, assured them there was no escape as everyone was already trapped in his magic called Palaces of Dreams. The manager noticed they were no longer in the building, while Jerry commented that everything felt like a dream. Beck explained that the location was a virtual space he had created where only he decided who could leave. Still on his knees, Jihan reflected, unable to believe that someone could create something so grand. He compared it to S's ability but activated his own analysis skill, revealing information about Beck's special magic. The information window indicated that Beck created dreams where reality blurred with truth. Jihan noticed that the overwhelming mana had disappeared, so he stood up and approached the manager, stating that he wouldn't waste any more time. At that moment he was teleported near Beck, who commented on how quickly Jihan attacked, and given the opportunity Jihan was confused by what had happened, and Beck taunted him, asking if he couldn't figure out what occurred. He had merely been relocated. Beck then told Jihan to look at the manager and warned that without his interference the manager would have died. At this moment the monsters emerging from the manager's back were revealed, leaving Jihan perplexed as he questioned what they were. The manager, removing his glasses, remarked that things weren't going as planned, and that he knew he'd eventually face a hero this powerful. He then amplified his abilities, transforming further. It was explained that he had created so many tentacles that they were indistinguishable, a direct result of injecting enormous amounts of mana crystals into himself. This was presented as the pinnacle of all the research conducted by Mlim. This is Beck Chang's special technique, allowing the use of magic with unlimited range. However, despite appearing perfect, it has several flaws. The first is that it consumes an enormous amount of mana from the user. Dream Palace requires so much mana that most mages can barely sustain it for a minute. However, Beck is different, as his insane mana reserves allow him to surpass this limit. For this reason he is recognized as the best mage in Korea. But this ability has another significant weakness: to use it the target must be far away, and if someone gets too close the distortions disappear, leaving Beck vulnerable. Is akin to opening the path to his defeat. For this reason he heightens his perception to avoid surprises. Even so, Jerry managed to enter the safe zone, not because Beck didn't notice her presence, but because he simply forgot she was there. Now Beck wonders how she got so close so quickly and what technique she used. There is only one explanation for it. He looks behind him and comments that he never imagined she could be an Asian. Jerry responds, impressed that Beck knows about her people. He then reveals that he was responsible for the annihilation of her entire species 14 years ago. The AIA invaded Earth and started a war that changed the planet's fate. Beck explains that a team he was part of eliminated all the Asians, or so he thought, until discovering she had survived with a dagger at Beck's neck. Jerry hears his surprise at seeing her alive. He asks why she survived and whether she joined the group for revenge. Jerry laughs and replies that she wouldn't seek revenge against a failed people who couldn't even win battles. She then reveals her objective: to bring chaos, blood, and screams to the world. Beck comments that this is typical of her species. However, Jerry states she cannot let Ming Lim be killed because her boss has grand plans. Hearing this, Beck asks if her boss is still alive. Jerry laughs and says perhaps he is, perhaps not, and declares that it's time to end their conversation. She attempts to finish Beck, but he says he's gathered enough information and doesn't need to focus on him anymore. At that moment Jihan appears as Beck warns that someone even more dangerous might emerge. Jihan notices that Beck's magic doesn't work on Jerry due to her proximity, but that doesn't stop him from using someone else to attack. Jihan uses his aura blade, causing massive destruction. Beck comments that Jihan should have been more careful, but Jihan replies that he didn't hold back because he knew Beck could withstand it. Beck observes the damage to the Dream Palace and is impressed by Jihan's power. Realizing he's strong enough to face Doha, he also understands why Doha is so interested in him. Jihan then warns that Jerry is still alive. Beck comments that it's no surprise as his Asians are hard to kill. Jerry recovers and declares it's time to say goodbye, opening a spatial rift. Beck warns Jian of the danger of attacking at that moment, as the rift could pull them in. He suspects Jerry knows how the Dream Palace works, but only two people should understand his magic. Jerry announces she has to leave but promises they will meet again. She disappears through the rift while Jihan laments her escape. Beck on the other hand asserts that they've obtained valuable information and that there are still surviving as Asians. He suspects the as Asians are allied with the Yupk and plan to throw the world into chaos again, putting the entire planet at risk. Jihan questions whether the Yupk truly broke the peace treaty and initiated the revolt. Beck states that he can't discuss that now as he needs to head to Seoul and take Jihan with him. Jihan mentions that Bang and C who are still in the building, but Beck assures him that Red Hall reinforcements will be sent. Meanwhile, a scene in Seoul shows the chaos left by the monster invasion. A man hiding behind a car is revealed to be Epic's janitor. He wonders where all the monsters came from, calling C who he asks where she is and why she left him alone. C who explains that monsters are invading civilian areas, and urges him to hide until the heroes arrive. At that moment a monster appears behind him. Someone steps in to defeat the monster, commenting that Korea has gone mad while he's been away. So recognizes the voice and realizes it's her father Kim Jong-un, a former Class 3 hero of Korea, and so a portal opened midair emitting an intense glow that distorted the surrounding environment. From the portal emerged Beck and Jihan, visibly affected by the dimensional travel. Beck, adjusting his posture with a relieved expression, commented that they had finally arrived. Jihan, pale-faced and trembling, couldn't hold back his nausea and began vomiting the moment he touched the ground. Observing the scene, Beck chuckled lightly, teasing Jihan about how sick he seemed. He remarked that the trip wasn't so bad as if it were something routine. Jihan, still recovering, glared at him irritably and responded curtly, stating that the experience was horrible. He compared the sensation to his body being turned inside out, a comment that made Beck laugh even harder. Finally regaining his composure, Jihan noticed something strange around them. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, and the buildings on the horizon were in ruins. Turning to Beck, he asked ere they were. Beck crossed his arms, surveying the devastated scene ahead, and explained with seriousness they were in Seoul. It was a destroyed version, a grim reflection of what had happened due to the actions of the Yupk. Jihan's expression immediately shifted. He couldn't hide the anger in his voice as he asked why anyone would do such a thing. What could justify this level of destruction? Beck, while equally indignant, seemed more cautious. He commented that he hadn't expected the reports to be this severe, and judging by the state of the area they might encounter creatures along the way requiring height and vigilance. Shifting the focus, Beck asked if Jihan knew about the current situation with the hero associations. He suggested they might need to visit Doha at the DI Guild to gather more information and formulate a plan of action. Jihan agreed, but remained alert in his thoughts. His skill windows still indicated that he would encounter someone important there, so he decided to stay on guard as if fate were listening. A voice emerged from behind them. It was Doha greeting them unexpectedly, mentioning that Jang had already explained the entire situation. Doha stated that they weren't the only ones expected there, and soon others began to appear. Jun Kong from the Warriors Guild and Thuing from the Snowball Guild arrived shortly after. Jun Kong commented on the delay while Miss Swing seemed more curious, asking if the person in front of him was Jihan. Beck, ever optimistic, declared that at least they wouldn't need to search for the guilds anymore. Jihan, however, recognized the significance of the moment. They were standing before the leaders of the Warriors and Snowball Guilds, renowned figures and known as Korea's best. He reflected on the gravity of the situation and what it meant for the next steps. Then Doha's assistant appeared, visibly relieved to see him safe. Without wasting time, she asked about Bang in the squad, her concern evident in her voice. Jihan explained that when he arrived most were already dead except for Bang, who was gravely injured and being transported for care by Red Hall. The assistant, incredulous, asked how something like that could happen before Jihan could respond. Doha intervened, irritated. He demanded that Beck explain the situation. Beck, visibly somber, expressed regret for not arriving in time to save more lives, despite that he revealed that their actions weren't in vain. They obtained valuable information about the Yupk, something that could change the course of the fight. Beck's revelation that the Ions were still alive caused a shocking silence among everyone present. He detailed how he had faced an Asian named Jerry who used her concealment ability to remain completely hidden. Additionally, she affirmed that the leader of the Ions, believed to be dead, was still alive. This news left Doha stunned while the other leaders reacted with indignation and disbelief. The Atmosphere grew tense as the leaders began to argue, recalling past events they had promised never to mention again. Doha in turn threatened Beck, demanding he'd be absolutely certain of his claims. Both began to release their auras, further intensifying the tension in the air. Jihan, observing the scene, internally questioned the reason for so much conflict. His skills still indicated he would encounter someone unexpected, but so far nothing had happened. That's when Guts with red hair appeared at the scene. Juno pointed at him, commenting that they were facing the 6 greatest guild leaders. Guts, irritated, scolded his subordinate for exposing herself in front of rank 1 heroes. She, however, expressed gratitude for the opportunity to be there even though the situation was already chaotic. Guts declared that the Curious Guild needed to prove its worth by facing the major guilds sooner or later. Meanwhile, Guts' subordinates argued among themselves. One of them pointed at Jihan, noticing he was interacting with the guild leaders. Recognizing Jihan brought back bitter memories for Guts, who recalled the moment he expelled him from the guild under superior orders. He justified the decision as being for Jihan's safety, but the truth was far more cruel. When confronted, Jihan asked for honesty. Guts, finally giving in, admitted that he considered Jihan useless, claiming that his constant meddling was harming the squad. Jihan calmly thanked him for his honesty and accepted his expulsion. Before leaving, he gave Guts one last piece of advice, saying that no matter how hard he tried, he would never reach rank 1. These words enraged Guts, who began cursing Jihan. At that moment, someone else arrived asking for him. It was Shu's father, who mentioned wanting to find Jihan to discuss an important matter. After the discussion between the 6 generals of the great guilds, the scene shifts again. Now we see people working for the Red Hall arriving at the location armed with rifles. They wait, seemingly prepared for whatever might come, though they don't know exactly what to expect. Moments later, one of them declares they have found the target they were looking for. The target is a survivor of the Dice Guild. He orders that the target be taken safely and begins to wonder where the other person they were also searching for is. He questions whether it wasn't mentioned that there was a woman with him. As he wonders about the woman's whereabouts, it is at that exact moment that everyone is trapped by magical threads. The 3 individuals present try to understand what's happening. One of them tells the others to remain calm, explaining that it's a weak binding spell. He mentions that they are using draining armor, so it won't be of a problem. However, he also comments that this binding ability feels very familiar. Then See, who appears and asks who these people are and if the Yup sent them there. One of the people tied up, surprised, calls Su by name. She then asks how he knows who she is. At that moment, the person removes his helmet and reveals his identity, saying he's surprised to see that the rescue target is none other than Su. He introduces himself as Yening and mentions that they studied together at the Hero Academy. The scene then shifts to Guts M and C, whose father. Guts asks a man who appears to be a civilian what he's doing there. The man responds that he's just a passing civilian and says they had just been talking about Jihan. Suspicious, Guts questions if he's really a civilian. Since the city has been closed for hours, he demands the man explain his presence at the location, insisting it's a war zone and suggesting Su's father should reveal who he really is. Say's father remarks that Guts is being a bit aggressive but admits he has a point. He also explains that he doesn't have any documents to identify himself. At that moment, the cleaning guy from the Epic Guild introduces himself and asks everyone to wait a moment, promising to explain everything. He reveals that he manages Mong Tang, a monster cleaning service, and has a partnership with the Epic Guild. He also introduces himself as John Kim, father of the guild master Sim. Recognizing him, says it's no surprise they look familiar. Juno asks if she knows who he is. Sim replies that he's undoubtedly a legend among mages. She explains that he was a hero who helped win the battle 10 years ago and afterward withdrew from the hero world to focus on research. She also comments that every mage knows his name. C, whose father, a bit embarrassed, says that some details are exaggerated but most of the story is true. At that moment, Semlin bows in respect and asks John Kim for an autograph, saying it's a great honor. The person in charge of Guts's belongings states that this is enough to believe the words of Shu's father. Guts, irritated, thinks to himself why someone would want to talk to Jihan, someone so renowned. The tense atmosphere increases when Beck suddenly appears. He says that Guts has such a deadly look that it even gives him chills, and warns that if he continues like this, Guts will end up with wrinkles. Everyone is surprised by Beck's sudden appearance. Guts, confused, asks How he appeared without being noticed since he didn't sense his presence. Beck explains that he was watching and noticed that the others were nothing but novice heroes from the Kiros Guild. Beck then turns to Sei's father and asks what he's doing in Korea. Sei's father greets him and says it's been a long time since they last saw each other. Beck with a suspicious look comments that he hasn't set foot in Korea for a long time and now appears just when Korea is in decline. See whose father responds that he has family issues to resolve and hopes Beck understands the reason for his presence there. He also reveals that today is the day his wife passed away and that he came to commemorate this date with Isayu. Still suspicious, Beck activates an ability and appears beside Sei's father, calling him an idiot for not warning him beforehand. Everyone there wonders what just happened. Beck in a softer tone says it's been a long time and invites Shu's father to have a drink after everything is settled. See his father replies that he would like to but he won't have time for that at this moment. The cleaning guy is called and he recognizes the voice. He runs toward Jihan exclaiming that it's been years since they last saw each other. Jihan, surprised, asks what he's doing in that place. Jihan then spots Guts, also known as Hai and Take Kim, and Guts mutters something in response. Jihan observes that everyone there seems to be fighting against the monsters in the city. Jihan approaches Guts and greets him, saying it's been a long time since they last met. He also noticed that Guts's platoon was helping to protect the city. Guts with sarcasm calls Jai little and tells him not to act as if he's on the same level as all the S-rank heroes. Guts makes it clear that he knows what Jihan is trying to do, clinging to the shadows of rank 1 heroes. He also states that Jihan will never reach that rank and that he should stop deluding himself. Jihan responds that Guts hasn't changed at all since he left the platoon. He provokes him, saying that Guts is still arrogant like a child. Jihan reminds Guts that he will never reach rank 1 no matter how hard he tries. Furious, Guts rushes to attack Jihan, calling him a piece of it. That moment Doha appears and grabs Guts's head, asking what he thinks he's doing. Doha, assessing the situation, comments that he never expected Guts to be so easily intimidated. He asked Jian how he managed to cower for so long. Jihan thanks Doha for intervening. Still irritated, Guts wonders how someone can belittle him so much as if he were insignificant. He promises that he will make Jihan pay for this humiliation. At that moment Mho greets Mr. Kim, saying it's been a long time and it's good to see him again. He comments that in the past they were all novices and now they are important leaders, owners of guilds in Korea. Doha, interrupting, says that this is not the time for nostalgia. Shu's father then states that he's aware of that, and by observing the mana signals he perceives that the ions have finally begun to reveal themselves. He reveals that he's been observing mana traces all over Japan and that Korea is not the only one in their sight. See whose father warns that the world is preparing for the return of the ions, putting everyone on alert. Beck in a sad tone asks if they still don't believe his words. Ignoring the question, Sei's father turns to Jihan and asks if he is really Jihan. With that, Jihan confirms, and at that moment an information window appears before Jihan, indicating that he has found the individual he was looking for. See his father. Jihan, thinking to himself, wonders why his ability guided him to this person. Seo's father then explains that Seo has already told him a bit about the situation and thanks everyone for interrupting the IC's plans. He says he would like to discuss many things but that can wait. He asks Jihan and could to stay out of everything that's happening. Jihan, confused, asks why. Shu's father reveals that the ions are after Sil and his daughter Seo. At that moment the scene changes and a helicopter appears in the background. A voice announces that they have finally arrived and will land shortly, asking everyone to prepare inside the helicopter. CA confirms that they are ready for landing. Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.